Kinde awoke with a jolt, her head pounding as if 1,000 hammers were striking in unison. Her throat and nasal passages burned raw, as though sandpaper had been dragged through them, leaving her breath labored and each inhale a small torment. She forced herself upright, her movements sluggish and unsteady, and took in the ramshackle shelter around her. Yes, shelter was too generous a word. To Kinde, it was nothing more than a dilapidated hovel, barely capable of keeping out the wind and rain, and certainly no match for the elements beyond. Through the gaping cracks in the walls, she could see the outside world, a vast, desolate expanse of sand, swirling and shifting in a relentless storm of ochre and gold. The horizon was a blur, consumed by the unyielding dance of the yellow haze. What on earth was going on? Ignoring the protests of her aching body, she stumbled from the cot and made her way to the edge of the shelter. Peering out, she was met with the sight of an endless sea of sand, its surface rippling like the skin of some ancient, slumbering beast. The wind lashed at her face, sharp grains of sand biting into her skin like tiny needles, leaving her cheeks stinging and raw. Behind her, a faint rustling sound broke through the howling wind. The noise pulled her from her daze, and she turned sharply, her heart pounding with unease. Following the direction of the sound, she spotted a cluster of similar shacks behind hers, each as worn and weather-beaten as the one she occupied. A small group of figures loitered in front of one of the shelters, their whispers carried faintly on the wind. They gestured toward her, their faces shut out and indistinct, their murmurs too soft to discern. And then her eyes were drawn to the structure at the center of it, a colossal fortress, its surface smooth and curved like the shell of a giant egg. The other shelters seemed to orbit it, arranged in a haphazard constellation, as if paying homage to the monolithic edifice. The sight of the fortress sent a sharp, searing pain lancing through her skull. It was as if 1,000 shards of glass had been driven into her brain all at once. She cried out, clutching her head, and before she could resist, the world tilted violently, and she collapsed to the ground, unconscious. In the final moments, before darkness claimed her, she glimpsed a small figure stumbling toward her, its movements awkward and unsteady. A child's voice, shrill with panic, reached her ears, calling out a single word, "Sister." When Kinde opened her eyes again, the pain had dulled to a distant throb, and her mind was no longer her own. Fragments of memory disjointed, foreign, and yet undeniably hers flooded her consciousness. She had crossed worlds. Fawn was the privileged young woman of the 21st century, the pampered daughter of wealth and luxury. In her place was a girl of the wastelands, born 50 years into the era of desolation, her body already marked by the cruel touch of radiation burns. A century ago, the Earth had been ravaged by nuclear fallout. Waves of contamination had swept across the planet, twisting flora and fauna into grotesque, mutated forms. A deadly virus had spread like wildfire, turning countless humans into mindless, ravenous creatures. The apocalypse had descended, and humanity had been brought to its knees. Those who survived had clawed their way through the chaos, discovering latent abilities, powers born of desperation and evolution. Bands of these gifted individuals formed the backbone of humanity's resistance, establishing fortified bases where the remnants of civilization could take refuge. For decades, life had been a grim struggle, a desperate dance of survival against the relentless onslaught of mutants, zombies, and the unforgiving environment. But 50 years ago, humanity had begun to claw its way back, adapting to the shattered remnants of the world. The apocalypse had given way to the age of the wastelands. The original owner of this body had lived her first 16 years within the relative safety of one of these bases, protected by her parents, both of whom were gifted. Life had been hard, but manageable. That was, until 6 months ago, when her parents disappeared during a mission. Orphaned and powerless, she and her younger sister had been cast out of the base, left to fend for themselves in a world that showed no mercy. With the last of their parents' meager savings, they had eked out a meager existence for a few months. But when the credits ran dry, desperation had driven the girl to scavenge in the wilds, a place teeming with danger, where mutated beasts and the remnants of the infected roamed freely. The wilds held treasures, relics of a bygone era, untouched by decay. Building materials, scraps of paper bearing printed words, and other artifacts of the old world were invaluable in this age of scarcity and cultural collapse. But luck had not been on her side. Instead of finding treasure, she had stumbled into a high radiation zone and paid the price. Fan Qingde pressed a hand to her abdomen, where a dull H radiated upward, and marveled at the resilience of this body. Though it lacked the awakened abilities of the gifted, it had endured a level of radiation that would have killed an ordinary person from her old world 100 times over. Still, the memories left her reeling, her head pounding with the weight of it all. Others who crossed worlds found themselves as princesses, generals, or heroines of grand tales. But her, she had landed in the middle of this god-forsaken wasteland, penniless, powerless, and utterly insignificant. Even scavenging seemed beyond her reach. Big sister. The soft, trembling voice pulled her from her thoughts. She turned her head, her gaze meeting the wide, tear-filled eyes of her younger sister King Luan. The child was small, no more than 4 years old, her face gaunt and sallow, her cheeks devoid of the roundness and softness that should have belonged to her age. Her skin was rough and dry, and yet her eyes dark and luminous, filled with a quiet, unwavering trust were hauntingly beautiful. They reminded Fan Qingde of a loyal dog, gazing up at its owner with unshakable faith. For a long moment, Fan Qingde said nothing, her silence stretching thin and taut. King Luan's tears began to fall in earnest, her voice breaking as she whispered, "Sister, King Luan has been good. Please, please don't leave me again." Fan Qingde's chest tightened, a pain of guilt and frustration twisting through her. The original owner of this body had been so desperate, so overwhelmed, that she had considered giving her sister away. Children between the ages of 10 and 15 often began to manifest abilities, and with both parents being gifted, King Luan's potential was high. There were those who would have gladly taken her in. But King Luan had run away, returning to her sister's side. And when she learned of the radiation burns, the child had been inconsolable, crying until her voice was hoarse. Fan Qingde sighed deeply, her hand reaching out to stroke King Luan's brittle, straw-like hair. "I won't," she said softly. "I won't leave you again." In her past life, she hadn't been an only child. She had a younger brother, and though their relationship had been marked by constant bickering, the bond between them had been unshakable. How many times had she wished her brother were a sweet, adorable younger sister instead? Now it seemed, the universe had heard her wish and granted it in the most twisted way possible. The thought brought a wry smile to her lips, a faint flicker of humor cutting through the bleakness. Well, if this was her new reality, she would have to face it head-on. Her stomach growled loudly, echoing in the small space, and she realized she wasn't the only one. King Luan's empty belly made its protests known as well. That was the first priority. Rummaging through the memories of her new life, Fan Qingde located a battered old box, the entirety of the original owner's belongings. She recalled that there should still be a small amount of nutrient paste left. The box was a chaotic mess of odds and ends, its contents a testament to the original owner's desperation. Fan Qingde's fingers brushed against a crumpled plastic bag, its surface grimy and worn. She couldn't help but scoff. "Really, you picked up trash like this?" she muttered, holding the bag up to inspect it. The faded logo and smudged design on the plastic were barely recognizable, remnants of a world long gone. Still, she couldn't help but smile wryly. "I guess it's no surprise. This stuff doesn't decompose easily. It's probably one of the few things that survives out here." Her mind wandered briefly, imagining the contents of the bag restored to their original state. A soft, fragrant bun, golden and warm, a surface glistening with a faint sheen of oil. The thought was fleeting, but then something extraordinary happened. The plastic bag in her hands crackled and shifted, the sound sharp and startling in the silence. Before her astonished eyes, the grime and wear melted away, the bag's surface smoothing and brightening until it looked brand new. And then impossibly, the bag began to fill. Where there had been nothing, a golden bun now rested, its surface perfectly intact. The smell of freshly baked bread wafted up, rich and tantalizing. Fan Qingdai stared, her breath caught in her throat, as the impossible became reality. In her hands lay a pristine little bon, as if it had just been plucked from the shelves of a bakery long lost to time. Fan Qingdai's eyes widened in shock, her gaze darting back and forth to confirm she wasn't hallucinating. Only then, with a delayed sense of caution, did she turn her head toward the rickety door of the shack. Fortunately, their dilapidated shelter sat at the very edge of the shanty town, its entrance facing an endless expanse of ochre sand dunes. A desolate view, devoid of passers-by. Rising to her feet, she propped the warped wooden plank serving as a makeshift door into place. After ensuring it blocked any prying eyes from seeing inside, she exhaled in relief, and turned back toward King Luan. She had been racking her brain, trying to find a way to explain the impossible, but when she turned, she saw the little girl had already fallen asleep, tears still clinging to her lashes. Curled up on a bed no more than a bare plank softened by a single layer of lumpy, threadbare bedding, King Luan's tiny frame seemed to shrink further. Even in her dreams, she whimpered uneasily, her voice as fragile as a spider's thread. "Sister." Fan Qingdai's heart softened, and with a sigh, she draped a tattered piece of clothing over King Luan's small body. Only then did her gaze shift back to the wooden crate filled with scraps and junk. Though she had no idea how this miraculous ability to restore objects to their original state had come to her, heaven had evidently granted her this boon. And she had no intention of wasting it. Sorting through the pile of trash, she unearthed 3 plastic bags and half a tube of nutrient paste. The paste, still half full, felt too precious to squander on her newfound power. Skipping over it, her attention landed on the 3 plastic bags. 2 of them were barely recognizable as food wrappers and faintly bore the faded word chocolate, while the other had a blurry image of potato chips. The last one was so eroded by time that neither its design nor its purpose could be discerned. Fan Qingdai picked up the chocolate wrapper first. Closing her eyes, she silently willed it to return to its pristine state. A crackling sound, sharp and brittle, like dry leaves underfoot, filled the air. When she opened her eyes, she was greeted by the sight of a gleaming, brand-new chocolate bar resting in her hands, its wrapper smooth and unblemished. Her heart leapt with joy. Without hesitation, she turned her attention to the potato chip bag, invoking her so-called time reversal ability once more, a name she had whimsically given this strange power. As the potato chips were formed, a sudden wave of dizziness struck her. Her head throbbed with a piercing pain, as if needles were burrowing into her skull. The euphoria of her success ebbed, replaced by a sobering realization: this ability came at a cost. She had only used it 3 times, and already fatigue clawed at her, her body protesting the strain. But the memories of hardship etched into her very being urged her forward. Gritting her teeth, she tried once more with the final plastic bag. Nothing. The bag remained inert, stubbornly defying her will. Fan Qingdai frowned, her mind racing. This ability, she mused, was not unlike the supernatural powers she'd heard of night, depletable, prone to exhaustion. In theory, rest should restore her strength over time. Alternatively, she could hasten the process by absorbing crystal cores, the energy-rich nuclei found within zombies, mutated beasts, or even plants. But crystal cores were the currency of this desolate wasteland, more precious than gold. Fan Qingdai had none to her name, and an inexplicable instinct told her they wouldn't work with her particular ability anyway. For now her only option was rest. Still, the restored food in her possession was a lifeline, a fragile foothold in the treacherous climb of survival. With a full stomach, she could think more clearly, plan her next steps. Clutching the food, she sat back down on the wooden bed and gently nudged King Luan awake. "Big sister." The little girl's eyes flew open, her voice trembling with panic before she even registered her surroundings. "In here," Fan Qingdai said softly, her voice a balm. She reached out, pulling King Luan onto her lap. The bed was so small that even their slight frames felt cramped. King Luan instinctively wrapped her arms around Fan Qingdai's waist, pressing her face into her chest, as if the closeness could shield her from the world's cruelties. Fan Qingde stroked the child's back, her heart heavy with unspoken sorrow. These two sisters, orphaned and adrift like waterlogged driftwood, struggled to survive in a wasteland, teeming with danger. If the original owner of this body had barely managed to endure, how could King Luwen, so young and fragile, possibly have coped? The past 6 months must have been a waking nightmare for the little girl, every day fraught with fear and uncertainty. Determined to lift the gloom, Fan Qingde deliberately lightened her tone. King Luwen, look, your sister has something amazing to show you. The girl hesitated, then turned her head. Her eyes widened at the sight of the bright, colorful packaging on the bed. What's that? I've never seen anything like it. King Luwen's voice brimmed with curiosity, but she didn't reach out. Instead, she looked up at Fan Qingde, her face alight with the childlike wonder that had been absent for far too long. Fan Qingde picked up the small loaf of bread and tore it open gently. Smell this, King Luwen. Does it smell wonderful? King Luwen wrinkled her nose, sniffing like a little puppy. With each breath, her eyes grew brighter, practically glowing. It smells so good. What is it, sister? The girl's delight was infectious, her laughter bubbling over as her cheeks dimpled with joy. Her wide eyes sparkled, twin crescents of moonlight, her innocence momentarily unclouded by the harshness of their reality. Fan Qingde couldn't help but smile, her own eyes crinkling. This is a little loaf of bread. It's delicious, try it. She broke off a piece and popped it into King Luwen's mouth, taking a small bite herself. The sweetness bloomed on her tongue, soft and buttery with a faint hint of honey. It was a taste that felt almost alien in this barren world, a memory of a life long lost. King Luwen chewed faster and faster, her eyes shining as if they held galaxies. Swallowing, she exclaimed, "It's amazing, sister, this is the best thing I've ever eaten. The best, best, best." Fan Qingde chuckled. Of course it was. In her inherited memories, mutated plants and animals were exorbitantly expensive, luxuries only the privileged could afford. Most people subsisted on nutrient paste, a viscous, flavorless sludge that clung to the throat like glue. Her family had occasionally managed to buy mutated meat, but culinary traditions had long since eroded in the face of humanity's near extinction. The once vast repertoire of Chinese cooking had dwindled to basic roasting and boiling. The resulting dishes were so gamey and pungent they were almost inedible. "Eat as much as you like," Fan Qingde said, handing the rest of the bread to King Luwen. "Don't worry, your sister will find a way to earn points. I won't let you go hungry again." The loaf was small, barely enough for 2 bites each, but King Luwen refused to take more than her share. "Sister, you need to eat more. You're a grown-up, and you need strength to work." The little girl carefully divided the remaining bread, giving Fan Qingde the larger portion. Her selflessness brought tears to Fan Qingde's eyes. Compared to the selfish, entitled younger brother from her previous life, King Luwen's thoughtfulness was a balm to her soul. Before the girl could protest further, Fan Qingde quickly pulled out the chocolate bar. "Here, King Luwen, look what else I have." The sisters divided the scant snacks between them, washing it down with the remaining half-tube of nutrient solution. Only then did the gnawing emptiness in their stomachs subside, the burning cramps of hunger finally retreating like a tide. Fed at last, with a faint trace of sweetness lingering on their tongues, their bodies long accustomed to surviving on the bare minimum of nutrient paste felt a rare, fleeting sense of satisfaction. Fan Qingde began to feel the pull of sleep. Noticing the little girl beside her nodding off, head bobbing like a wilting flower, she simply pulled her into her arms. Together, they curled up on the narrow wooden cot, pressed close against the chill of the night. But Fan Qingde's sleep was anything but peaceful. Outside the ramshackle hut, the wind howled with a ferocity that seemed almost alive, carrying with it sharp grains of sand that lashed against the wooden boards. The poorly sealed plank let in more than just drafts. Fine streams of dust snuck through the cracks, swirling in the dim moonlight like ghostly tendrils. Several times, the noise and cold woke her, dragging her from shallow, restless dreams. In the latter half of the night, when the storm finally began to wane, she thought, with a weary sort of hope, that perhaps she might steal a few hours of uninterrupted rest. But then came the howls. Distant at first, the guttural cries of beasts rose and fell in the wind, their echoes threading through the night like the lament of some ancient, unseen predator. The sound alone was enough to make her blood run cold, her skin prickling with unease. This time, sleep was out of the question. Turning over, Fan Qingde glanced down at the small figure nestled against her. King Luan, at least, had fallen into a deep, untroubled slumber, her delicate features finally unmarked by the tension of wakefulness. Fan Qingde sighed softly, carefully extricating herself from the girl's grasp. Even in sleep, King Luan seemed to sense the loss of warmth. Her brows furrowed, her tiny frame curling into itself defensively. But she did not wake, and Fan Qingde, her heart itching at the sight, gently patted the little girl's back until her expression smoothed once more. Only then did she slip out of the hut. The wasteland beyond was a void, an endless expanse of darkness that seemed to swallow sound and light alike. It loomed, vast and unyielding, like the maw of some great abyss teeming with unseen horrors. Fan Qingde frowned, her gaze shifting back toward the distant fortress. The fortress at back shone like an artificial sun, its harsh, unyielding light spilling outward to faintly illuminate the outer shanty town. It was a fragile reassurance, but one she clung to nonetheless. The safety zone dispatched patrol squads of ability wielders daily, ensuring that the immediate vicinity of the base remained largely free of the monstrous creatures that roamed the wilds. Living here, on the fringes of civilization, was to live under the fortress' reluctant protection of precarious existence, but better than nothing. And yet, no matter how she tried, Fan Qingde could not shake her unease. The memories of this body foreign yet vivid were filled with images of horrors she could scarcely comprehend, beasts towering over houses, larger than trucks, their eyes burning with a feral, bloodthirsty rage, zombies, grotesque parodies of humanity, gnawing on flesh with mindless hunger, and plants, twisted and mutated, their roots feeding on the blood and bones of the unwary. She shivered. The original owner of this body had been powerless, her meager abilities insufficient to secure a spot closer to the fortress. Instead, she had been forced to settle here, in the outermost ring of the shanty town, where a single step beyond the makeshift door would lead directly into the unprotected wilderness. It meant that if even one predator slipped through the patrols, their fragile hut would be the first to fall. Fan Qingde's frown deepened, her mind racing. This would not do. They needed to move soon. Not necessarily into the fortress itself, but at least deeper into the shanty town, closer to the heart of the base. The closer they were to the fortress, the safer they would be. Because right now, she was little more than a defenseless woman with a malnourished child in tow. If a creature came for them, there would be no escape. Resolved, she returned to the hut, rummaging through the remnants of their meager supplies. Her fingers closed around the crumpled snack wrappers from the day before. Closing her eyes, she steadied her breathing, focusing. Just as she had done yesterday, she summoned her ability. And miraculously, the small loaf of bread reappeared, whole and untouched, as if time itself had reversed. Her heart leapt. 8 hours had passed since her last attempt, and it seemed her energy had recovered just enough for one use. Encouraged, she tried again, reaching for another item. But this time, a sharp, needle-like pain stabbed through her skull, forcing her to stop. Sitting down heavily on the wooden crate, she pressed her fingers to her temples, thinking. If 8 hours of recovery allowed her to reverse a single object, then a full day 24 hours would grant her the energy for 3. Yesterday, she had drained herself completely, leaving nothing in reserve. This ability was maddeningly slow. At this rate, she could barely ensure they wouldn't starve, let alone accumulate enough resources to barter for a better living space. Her initial excitement dimmed, replaced by frustration. She had hoped to use this newfound power to secure a future for herself and King Luan, but now it seemed like a far-off dream. Still, she refused to give up. For the rest of the day, she stayed in the hut, experimenting. By the end, she confirmed her theory. Her ability could only reverse objects up to a certain size. Larger items, like the oversized plastic bag she had attempted earlier, were beyond her current limits. But there was a silver lining. Each use of her ability seemed to nudge her closer to something an invisible experience bar slowly filling with each attempt. If she could level up, her power would grow stronger. That thought alone was enough to keep her going. For the next 3 days, she remained in the hut, nursing her injuries and practicing her ability. Slowly but surely, she revealed their stockpile, restoring small items and hoarding them for future use. And then on the 3rd day it happened. She reversed a 4th item, a tube of nutrient solution, and felt a surge of energy ripple through her. Tears welled in her eyes, unbidden. The relief was overwhelming, a testament to the countless hours of pain and effort she had endured. King Liyuan, watching her sister's emotional outburst, hesitated before offering her the bag of chips she had been holding. "Sister, you eat," she said softly, her white eyes filled with both concern and trust. Fan Qingde blinked, her heart aching at the gesture. "I'm not hungry," she lied, forcing a smile. "I ate some chocolate earlier." "You eat, King Liyuan. You need to grow big and strong." It wasn't entirely untrue. The chocolate had provided enough calories to sustain her, even if her stomach remained uncomfortably empty. Years of dieting in her previous life had taught her how to endure hunger. For now, survival took precedence over comfort. Her plan was simple: stockpile enough nutrient solution to barter for a safer place to live. The constant threat of the wild was a weight she could no longer bear. But fate had other plans. That very night, the howls of the beasts grew louder, closer. The air itself seemed to tremble with their approach, a harbinger of the chaos to come. Fan Qingde was never a sound sleeper, and the guttural roars of beasts inching closer jolted her awake in an instant, her instincts screaming that something was terribly wrong. She shot upright in bed, the abrupt motion startling King Liyuan, who scrambled up as well, her white eyes brimming with confusion. The little girl clutched at Fan Qingde's arm, her tiny fingers trembling, but to her credit, she did make a sound. Fear had taught her the value of silence. Fan Qingde strained her ears, her heart pounding like a war drum. The beastly howls were unmistakable now, growing louder, nearer, their menace pressing in on the fragile walls of the ramshackle shelter. There was no time to waste. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and began gathering their meager belongings with frantic efficiency. "King Liyuan," she barked, her voice sharp with urgency, "put on your shoes and coat. Bring anything important to mail packet." King Liyuan didn't understand, not fully, but she was obedient and quick-witted. She hopped off the bed, her small hands working deftly to prepare herself before assisting Fan Qingde. Between the two of them, it took mere moments to stuff their scant possessions into a battered leather backpack. Fan Qingde slung it over her shoulder, scooped King Liyuan into her arms, and made for the door. They had to move deeper into the shelter zone, closer to the base. The further in they got, the better their chances of surviving the onslaught of the beasts. Out here, on the fringes, they were nothing more than prey. But just as they stepped outside, King Liyuan tugged insistently at her sleeve. "Sister, the talisman father gave us, we did take it." Fan Qingde faltered, her mind scrambling to recall what King Liyuan was talking about. It wasn't until the little girl pointed to the doorway, her tiny finger trembling, that Fan Qingde's eyes landed on the object in question, a cracked jade pendant hanging above the threshold. A flicker of memory surfaced, fragmented and dim. The original owner of this body, or predecessor, so to speak, parents who clung to the remnants of ancient culture, even in this desolate, god-forsaken land. They had scavenged knowledge from ruined texts, piecing together fragments of a world long lost. It was from these old books that they had chosen the names King Liyuan and Qingde for their daughters, names steeped in history and meaning. The jade pendant, though damaged beyond value, had been salvaged during one of their expeditions into the ruins. Too broken to be of use to the base's researchers, it had been kept as a personal memento. Their father had once explained, in his halting way, that jade was revered in the old days, often fashioned into protective talismans to ward off misfortune and bring peace. The pendant had been hung above the doorway as a symbolic guardian for their fragile home. Fang Qingde had all but forgotten its existence. Now, as her fingers closed around the cool, fractured surface of the jade, a strange warmth seeped into her palm, spreading up her arm and into her chest. It was subtle, like the first rays of sunlight breaking through a storm, but unmistakable. For a moment, the icy grip of fear loosened its hold on her. Her breath caught. There was something peculiar about this pendant, something that defied explanation. But there was no time to dwell on it. She tucked it into the folds of her clothing, pressing it close to her skin, and tightened her grip on King Luan. They plunged deeper into the maze of shelters, waving through the narrow, suffocating alleys. The air grew heavier, the darkness more oppressive, as they neared the boundary between the outer and inner zones. Here, even the powerful floodlights mounted above the base barely reached, leaving the edges to blur into the infinite black of the wilderness beyond. Fang Qingde hesitated, her gaze darting back toward the outermost shelters. The people who lived here, if you could call it living, were like her and King Luan, the forgotten, the powerless, the expendable. The old, the sick, the weak, those with no one to shield them, no strength to climb higher. From the depths of her modern sensibilities, a pang of guilt twisted in her chest. She bit her lip, torn, before finally turning back and shouting at the top of her lungs, "The beasts are coming! Run toward the base!" Her voice sliced through the stillness, sharp and urgent. She didn't wait to see if anyone heeded her warning. If they believed her, chaos would soon erupt, a stampede of desperate bodies trampling over one another in blind panic. If they didn't, this place would be the first to fall, swallowed whole by the beasts. Either way, it was no longer safe to linger. She ran, King Luan clinging to her neck, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She hadn't eaten properly in days, and the strain of carrying the child was quickly sapping her strength. When she glanced back, she saw a flicker of light. Others had followed, their flashlights bobbing like fireflies in the dark. Relief was fleeting, though. The crowd behind her was growing, and the danger of being caught in a stampede loomed large. "Put me down, sister," King Luan said suddenly, her voice small but steady. "I can run in fast." Fang Qingde hesitated, her eyes dropping to King Luan's spindly legs. They looked as fragile as twigs, barely capable of supporting her weight, let alone carrying her at a sprint. But her own arms were trembling with exhaustion, and the determination in King Luan's face left little room for argument. She set the girl down, gripping her hand tightly as they began to run side by side. To her astonishment, King Luan kept pace, her breath labored, but her steps unwavering. Not once did she complain, even as her small frame shook with effort. They had just reached the brighter, safer zone when a group of men blocked their path. The leader, a wary man with a ruddy-like face, stepped forward, his eyes raking over Fang Qingde with a lecherous gleam that made her skin crawl. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" he demanded, his tone laced with suspicion and something far more sinister. Fang Qingde stiffened, her stomach churning. In her past life, she had been a spoiled heiress, accustomed to difference and adoration. No one had ever dared to look at her like this, as if she were prey. Her first instinct was to lash out, to put this man in his place, but the weight of her current reality pressed down on her, smothering the embers of her temper. "There are beasts heading this way," she said coldly, forcing steel into her voice. "Let me through, I need to warn the petrol team." The men laughed, a coarse, grating sound. The leader smirked, his expression dripping with mockery. "Beasts, you say? Convenient excuse. You just want to sneak into the inner zone, don't you? Looking for a protector, maybe." The others cheered, their laughter echoing in the dim light. One of them clapped the leader on the shoulder. "Hey Khan, maybe she's looking for you. You're the big shot around here, aren't you?" Fang Qingde's hands clenched into fists, her nails biting into her palms. Her fury surged, hot and volatile, but the frightened tremor in King Luan's grip anchored her. She lifted the girl into her arms once more, shielding her from their prying eyes. "If the beasts come," she said icily, "and people die because of your delay, can you bear that responsibility?" Khan's smirk faltered, but only for a moment. He snorted, waving her off dismissively. If there are beasts, the outer zone will hold them off long enough for us to notice. That's what you lot are for, isn't it? To buy us time. His gaze swept over her again, lingering in a way that made her stomach turn. But you little miss, wouldn't last a second. Why don't you stay here with us? We'll keep you safe for a price. Fine King Dave's blood boiled. These men, these cowards, were content to use the lives of the outer zone's residents as a buffer, sacrificing them without a second thought. Their complacency, their callousness, was a rot that festered in the heart of humanity, and it sickened her. A cacophony of desperate cries and wails erupted behind her, a discordant symphony of panic that clawed at the air. Fine King Day turned her head sharply, her gaze catching the sight of a frenzied crowd from the outer zone surging inward, their mouths spilling frantic warnings. Beasts, the beasts are coming. And beyond them, in the distance, came the guttural, earth-shaking roars of the creatures, a chorus of primal fury that rose and fell like waves crashing against the shore. The sheer volume of the sound was enough to betray the sheer number of the oncoming horde. Kanji's face darkened, his expression twisting with a venomous curse. Damn it, those filthy beasts, how the hell did they get here so soon? The panic-stricken exodus from the outer zone had obliterated the first line of defense, leaving it abandoned. The beasts, emboldened, would surge forward unimpeded, their path paved by the fleeing masses, and the inner zone would be laid bare before them. Fine King Day felt a flicker of grim relief. It had been her shouted warning that had stirred the outer zone's residents into action. Without it, the elderly, the infirm, the vulnerable, those who always noticed danger too late might have been caught unaware, left helpless as the beasts descended upon them. But her relief was short-lived. Kanji's eyes burned with fury as they locked onto her. It was you, he snarled, his voice venomous. You filthy whore, you tipped them off. His hand shot up, a slap aimed squarely at her face, and the men around him moved in, their postures bristling with menace. Fine King Day had had enough. Her patience, already frayed, snapped like an overstretched wire. In an instant, she shielded King Lewin with her arms, twisting her body to absorb the blow with the bulky backpack slung across her shoulders. The slap landed harmlessly against the pack. Without hesitation, she set King Lewin down and spun back around, her leg snapping upward in a brutal arc. Her foot connected with Kanji's groin, the impact precise and unrelenting. He hadn't expected her to fight back. A shock registered on his face a split second before the pain did. He crumpled to the ground with a strangled cry, clutching his stomach as he folded in on himself, utterly incapacitated. The other men hesitated for only a heartbeat before charging at her, their faces twisted with anger. Fine King Day shoved King Lewin aside, out of harm's way, and stepped forward to meet them head-on. "Are your brains made of shit?" she spat, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "You think this is the time to pick a fight with me? Do I look like someone you can mess with?" Her words were sharp, but her movements were sharper. Her kicks and punches landed with ferocity, each strike precise and unrelenting. The men, untrained and unprepared, faltered under her assault, stumbling backward, their aggression crumbling under the weight of her fury. Only when they were sufficiently subdued did she allow herself a moment to breathe, her chest heaving as she surveyed the scene. Years of modern luxuries had softened her, but the self-defense classes, boxing, kickboxing, a smattering of martial arts had left their mark. She was a professional, not by a long shot, but against a few untrained thugs. She could hold her own. She turned, her focus snapping back to King Lewin. They needed to move. No. But as she reached for the girl, her blood ran cold. One of the men, overlooked in the scuffle, had crept toward King Lewin, his hand outstretched to grab her. King Lewin. Fine King Day's voice tore from her throat, raw with urgency. Her heart ceased as she watched the frail, delicate child move with startling precision. In her tiny hand was a knife as small, almost toy-like. Without hesitation, without even a flicker of doubt, King Lewin swung it, the blade slicing cleanly through the man's hand. His scream was guttural, a sound ripped from the depths of his being. Blood spattered the ground as his thumb dangled by a thread of skin, grotesque and surreal. Fine King Day's scalp prickled with horror, a cold sweat breaking out across her skin. But she pushed the fear aside, rushing to King Luan and pulling her into a fierce embrace. "Don't be afraid," she murmured, her voice trembling but steady. "You did nothing wrong, King Luan. You were protecting yourself." The girl looked up at her, her expression unnervingly calm. "Sister," she said softly, "King Luan helped you fight the bad man." Fine King Day's heart thundered in her chest. She stared at the child, stunned into silence for a moment, before nodding with conviction. "Yes," she said, her voice firm. King Luan was amazing. Stooping the girl into her arms, she kicked the injured man aside and bolted, waving through the chaos as the sounds of panic and destruction swelled around them. The crowd was a living, breathing tide, surging toward the base with a desperation that was almost palpable. The air was thick with the stench of fear, the cries for help echoing endlessly. And then, the base's loudspeakers crackled to life, their cold, mechanical voice cutting through the din, Utter's own personal, "Cease your actions immediately. Failure to comply will be considered an act of aggression against the base. Cease your actions immediately. Failure to comply will be considered an act of aggression against the base." Fine King Day let out a bitter laugh, the sound sharp and hollow. The roars of the beasts were deafening, their approach unmistakable. There was no way the base hadn't noticed. No, this was deliberate. They wanted the outer zone residents to serve as cannon fodder, to wear down the beasts before they reached the base's defenses. The realization settled in her chest like a stone, heavy and suffocating. Resources were scarce in the wastelands, but to use human lives as a buffer, to save on weapons and energy. It was monstrous. She clung to King Luan, her body moving instinctively as she pushed deeper into the throng. The beasts were closing in, their roars mingling with the screams of those who had fallen behind. The acrid scent of blood filled the air, carried on the wind like a grim harbinger. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the base's gates opened. A convoy of combat vehicles emerged, carrying a team of ability users. The crowd erupted into cheers, their voices tinged with a fragile hope. "They've come to save us. The base has abandoned us. Thank you, base. Thank you for protecting us." But Fine King Day's gaze remained downcast. She refused to look at the ability users, their faces etched with arrogance and indifference. She refused to listen to the cries of gratitude, knowing they were misplaced. And she refused to acknowledge the sobs of despair that still echoed from the rear of the crowd, where the beasts were feasting. Taking advantage of the chaos, she slipped out of the crowd, her arms tightening around King Luan as she made her way toward the base's walls. There, in the shadow of the towering structure, she found a small patch of ground and sank down, her legs trembling with exhaustion. The fighting outside raged on, the sounds of battle and the roars of the beasts blending into a cacophony that seemed to stretch on forever. King Luan had fallen asleep in her arms, her small body trembling even in slumber. Fine King Day stroked her hair gently, her heart itching at the sight of the girl's furrowed brow. The memory of King Luan wielding a knife was seared into her mind. The girl had been so calm, so composed. Too composed. Fine King Day knew the act had left its mark, no matter how much King Luan tried to hide it. She sighed, her gaze drifting to the ground as her thoughts spiraled. Their situation was dire. They had made enemies in the inner zone, and her plans to secure a place there now seemed impossible. Her mind churned, searching for a solution, until a glimmer of memory surfaced. The jade pendant. Her hand darted to her pocket, pulling out the small, intricately carved piece of jade. It caught the light, its surface gleaming faintly. Her eyes lit up with a spark of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, this could change everything. Fine King Day cradled King Luan in her arms, the small girl's frail frame conveniently shielding them from prying eyes in every direction. Only when she was certain no one was watching did her curiosity bubble over, pulling her attention to the jade pendant resting cool and weighty in her palm. According to every trope she'd ever read about time travel, this peculiar piece of jade, its surface smooth yet somehow alive with a faint, inexplicable energy, was likely the harbinger of some extraordinary, heaven-defying opportunity. Excitement quickened her breath as she reached for King Luan's small knife, the blade dull from overuse, but sharp enough for her purpose. Gritting her teeth, she drew a shallow cut across her fingertip, when seen as a bead of crimson welled up and slid down onto the pendant. Nothing happened. Her face fell. Undeterred, she tried again, muttering incantations as if plucking them from the pages of a well-thumbed novel. Open sesame, open, O mysterious jade, portal, reveal thyself. Come on, big guy, what do I have to do to make you work? Dozens of attempts yielded nothing but silence, her enthusiasm slowly curdling into disillusionment. Forget it, she muttered under her breath. Having a time reversal skill is already more than I deserve. Her voice trailed off, her thoughts nagging on the phrase. Time reversal skill. Her eyes widened suddenly, her gaze snapping back to the blood-streaked pendant in her hand. What's wrong, sister? King Luan's soft, sleepy voice broke through her thoughts. The little girl stirred in her arms, sitting up with a start, her wide eyes scanning the surroundings for danger. Only when she found none did her tense shoulders relax. Nothing, nothing at all, Fang Qingde murmured hurriedly, pulling the child closer to her chest. And here, oh, back to sleep, sweetheart. Everything's fine. She stroked King Luan's bony back in soothing, rhythmic motions until the girl's breathing evened out once more, her small body sinking back into the tenuous comfort of sleep. Only then did Fang Qingde return her focus to the pendant. The events of the previous night played in her mind. 4 successful uses of the time reversal ability, each one leaving her faintly dizzy, as though the very fabric of her being had been stretched thin. Now, with the first light of dawn creeping across the horizon, nearly 12 hours had passed since her last attempt. She made her decision swiftly, her result as sharp as the blade she had just used. If this pendant held even a fraction of the potential she suspected, she had to find out. Clutching it tightly, she activated the skill. A familiar warmth surged through her palm, the sensation oddly comforting despite the immediate drain she felt in her chest, as though her energy had been siphoned away in an instant. Slowly, impossibly, the jade began to mend itself, cracks sealing, imperfections vanishing as though wound by an unseen hand. A carved phoenix on its surface emerged in breathtaking detail, its wings poised mid-flight, its eyes alight with an almost sentient gleam. For a fleeting moment, it seemed alive, ready to burst forth in a blaze of feathers and fire. But when she blinked, it was still just a carving, lifeless and inert. Unwilling to believe her senses had deceived her, Fang Qingde pressed her finger to the phoenix's eye, smearing fresh blood over the intricate carving. The instant the blood touched it, the phoenix seemed to stir, its eyes glowing faintly as if imbued with a spark of life. A piercing cry echoed in her mind, sharp, resonant, and unmistakably avian. Before she could process what was happening, the jade pendant vanished from her hand, dissolving into nothingness. And yet, she could feel it, its presence embedded somewhere deep within her, as though it had become a part of her very being. Her vision blurred, the world around her dissolving into a haze of golden sand and weary faces. When it cleared, she found herself gazing upon a vast, unspoiled expanse of grassland. The air here was impossibly pure, the kind that carried the faint scent of dew and wildflowers. A stream meandered through the field, its crystal-clear waters reflecting a sky so vividly blue it seemed otherworldly. By the stream stood a colossal tree, its bark gnarled and weathered, its branches bare as though stripped of life. It loomed over the landscape like a sentinel, ancient and enigmatic. There was nothing else, no sign of life or movement. Yet her heart raced, the realization hitting her like a thunderclap. The pendant held a spacious secret, untouched sanctuary. And that stream, with its pristine waters, was a treasure beyond measure in this desolate, polluted wasteland where even the most basic resources were rationed like gold. In the harsh reality of the wasteland, water was more precious than blood. Every drop was tainted, requiring expensive purification tablets to render it drinkable. Even unfiltered water cost a small fortune at the base. Bathing was a luxury so unattainable it bordered on myth. Sand was the only means of cleaning oneself, its coarse grains scraping away dirt in a ritual as futile as it was degrading. Fang Qingde, with her delicate upbringing, had endured this existence for days, her skin crawling with the grime she couldn't wash away. The thought of immersing herself in that stream, of drinking her fill, and scrubbing away the filth, was almost too much to bear. But she couldn't. Not yet. Logic reigned in her impulse, reminding her of the child in her arms, the prying eyes around her. If she vanished now, even for a moment, the base authorities would hunt her down with the fervor of wolves scenting blood. Steeling herself, she withdrew her consciousness from the space and rummaged through her pack, pulling out a leather water pouch. And sealing it behind her back, she willed it into the space, her breath catching as it disappeared seamlessly. When she re-entered the sanctuary, the pouch lay on the grass, its emptiness a stark contrast to the abundance surrounding it. She filled it to the brim, her hands trembling with anticipation, and brought it back out. The weight of the water pouch in her hands was almost too much. Tears pricked at her eyes as she held it, the reality of her discovery sinking in. She could drink. She could bathe. She could survive. Her elation, however, disturbed King Luan, who stirred awake once more. "Sister," the girl asked, her voice tinged with worry. Fan Qingde sighed, resigning herself to the child's wakefulness. She shifted her body to shield King Luan from view, unscrewed the pouch, and pressed it to the girl's lips. "Drink," she whispered urgently. "Drink as much as you want." King Luan obeyed without question, her small hands clutching the pouch as she gulped greedily. When she finally lowered it, Fan Qingde snatched it back, tilting her head back to drink deeply, savoring each drop as though it were ambrosia. By the time a curious onlooker approached, the pouch was empty, its last drop drained. Fan Qingde turned to the man, with a rueful smile, shaking the pouch as if to emphasize its barrenness. "That was the last of it," she said with a sigh. "I don't know how we'll manage now." Her words were punctuated by King Luan's perfectly timed sniffles, the girl rubbing her eyes with a skillful mimicry of despair. Fan Qingde bit back a laugh, her expression hardening as she added, "Don't worry, King Luan. Your sister will figure something out. Maybe you'll find some soft targets to rub later." She let the threat hang in the air, her smile turning feral as she toyed with the knife in her hand, its blade catching the light in ominous flashes. The would-be thieves lurking nearby hesitated, their greed faltering in the face of her calculated menace. One by one, they melted back into the shadows, leaving the sisters in peace for now. Fan Qingde surveyed the temporarily subdued crowd, her lips curling into a cold, sardonic smile. On the wasteland, the law of the strong preying on the weak was not just the norm, it was the only rule. If you didn't want to be trampled underfoot, you had to show a side of yourself that was feral, unyielding, and utterly indifferent to death. But Fan Qingde was not naive. She knew that no matter how fierce she and King Luan, two young women, might appear, their bravado would only intimidate those who were already powerless. Anyone with even a shred of ability would see through their facade in an instant. And when the squads of ability wielders returned from their missions and the city gates were left unguarded, the displaced outlanders, those whose homes had been razed, would inevitably clash with the inner district. The chaos would be a feeding ground for opportunists. Fan Qingde couldn't afford to wait for that moment. She had to find a safe haven for herself and King Luan before the storm began to brew. Sifting rapidly through the fragmented memories of the body's original owner, she pieced together a plan. Her mind settled, sharp as a blade, onto perfection. Rising to her feet, she slung her backpack over her shoulder and grabbed King Luan's hand, pushing through the throng with a single-minded determination. Her destination, the gates of the base. The closer you were to the base, the safer you were. That much was common knowledge. But proximity to the gates wasn't just about safety, it was a statement of status. To be near the walls was one thing, to be near the gates was to declare your place in the hierarchy. In the recesses of her inherited memories, Fan Qingde recalled three major factions dominating the inner district, the most formidable of which was led by Zhang Chengji. Once a member of an ability-wielding squad, Zhang Chengji had suffered a catastrophic accident during the mission. His crystalline core had been shattered. Though he survived, his abilities were irrevocably lost, and with them, his place within the base. Passed out, he had carved a new path for himself among the ordinary people outside the walls. His combat skills and worldly experience quickly earned him a following, and he established a faction that stood unshaken. What truly solidified Zhang Chengji's position as the undisputed leader was his reputation for fairness. He was fiercely protective of his own and treated the common folk with a rough sort of benevolence. Compared to the other factions, his was the most reliable shelter, a fact that Feng Qingde could not ignore. Given her recent altercation with Kun Ji, the head of the second faction, Zhang Chengji's group was the only viable sanctuary for her and King Luan. And so, with resolute steps, she headed straight for Zhang Chengji's territory near the gates. As they walked, she discreetly refilled her empty water pouch from her backpack, the liquid slushing softly as it settled. When they arrived, Feng Qingde wasted no time. Her voice rang out, sharp and commanding, as she pointed at a man who was clearly one of Zhang Chengji's patrol guards. "Take me to your leader, I have business to discuss with him." The man blinked, startled by her audacity, his eyes narrowing as he scrutinized the two sisters. Their plain attire, and the lack of any discernible ability, aura initially made him dismissive. But their unflinching composure under his gaze, their growing impatience etched into their brows, gave him pause. There was a quiet steel in their demeanor, a calm that unsettled him. Hesitating, he finally asked, his tone more respectful than before, "And who might you be? What should I tell the boss?" Feng Qingde lifted her chin, her voice steady and unyielding. "My father is King Zong, my mother, Zhang Xin. Both were members of Squad 182, my father was the captain." The man's eyes widened, his guarded expression softening into something akin to reverence. He straightened his posture, his tone now laced with deference. Though ability wielders were rare, the Xuan base, one of the four great strongholds on the wasteland, housed thousands of them. As an ordinary man who had barely set foot inside the base, the guard had no way of verifying Feng Qingde's claims. Nor did he know that her parents had been missing for over half a year, their names long erased from the base's roster. All he understood was that he could not afford to offend the daughter of two ability wielders. Without another word, he turned and jogged off to relay her message to Zhang Chengji. Once he was out of earshot, King Luan tugged at Feng Qingde's sleeve, her voice a cautious whisper. "Sister, what should I say if they ask about father and mother?" King Luan knew her sister was lying. But the wasteland was no place for the moral delicacies of a bygone era. Lies were tools, as necessary as a blade or a bottle of clean water. She understood this much. If Feng Qingde lied, she would help sustain the lie. If Feng Qingde killed, she would hand her the knife. Feng Qingde ruffled the younger girl's hair with a faint smile. "I only used them as a pretext to get us through the door. Once we meet their leader, he'll tell the truth. These things can't be hidden forever." The absence of ability wielders in their family would be obvious to anyone who cared to look. If they were to settle in Zhang Chengji's territory, the truth would come out sooner or later. Feng Qingde had no intention of maintaining the carrot beyond its immediate utility. King Luan didn't entirely understand, but she nodded obediently, her questions silenced for the moment. When they were finally ushered into Zhang Chengji's presence, King Luan's white eyes darted to her sister, curiosity and apprehension mingling in her gaze. Feng Qingde met her look with a reassuring smile, pulling a water flask from her backpack. "Ah Sang," she began, her tone confident, but not overbearing. "I'd like to buy a place to settle on your land. Would a weekly payment of 1 flask of water like this suffice?" Without waiting for a response, she unscrewed the cap and tilted the flask, letting a few crystalline drops fall into her palm. The men standing behind Zhang Chengji stared, their eyes widening at the sight of the pure, clear liquid. It was as if they were witnessing a miracle. For those living outside the base, water was a grim compromise, muddy, sand-laden, and barely drinkable even after purification tablets and hours of settling. This water, untainted and glistening, was a luxury reserved for the elite within the base. To see such water offered so casually, even spilled for demonstration, was enough to convince most of them that Feng Qingde was exactly who she claimed to be. But Zhang Chengji's expression betrayed no such awe. He merely raised an eyebrow, his smile polite, but distant. Miss King, if your parents are truly ability wielders, how could my humble domain possibly accommodate two such esteemed guests? It took Feng Qingde a moment to realize he was addressing her as Miss King. A trace of amusement flickered across her face as she crossed into another world and even lost her surname. It was no time to dwell on such trivialities. She met his gaze squarely, her voice steady as she admitted, "My parents went missing on a mission." "What?" The guard who had escorted them in turned crimson with anger, his voice trembling. "You tricked me." He glanced nervously at Jane Chengji, clearly terrified of being reprimanded. But Feng Qingde quickly interjected, her tone calm and measured. "It's true my parents are missing, but their former squad mates still look after us. Every week, they send supplies to ensure we're cared for." Her meaning was clear, she and King Luan were not without protection. The lie was necessary, a shield against the predatory eyes that roamed the wasteland. Two unprotected girls were easy prey. But two girls under the shadow of powerful benefactors. That was a different story altogether. Zhang Qingji's expression remained unchanged, betraying little surprise. From the moment Feng Qingde had mentioned securing a place to settle down, he had already surmised that something unfortunate must have happened to her parents. Yet, as the saying goes, even a starved camel is larger than a horse. Her father, once the captain of a team of ability wielders, would have endowed her with a sharpness of vision that couldn't be easily dismissed. And indeed, Feng Qingde opening movie a jug of grey purified water followed by invoking the weighty phrase "an old favor owed to my parents," was no small gambit. Zhang Qingji, far from underestimating her, found himself growing more cautious, more deliberate. For a long moment, Jane's gaze lingered on the two sisters before him. His sharp eyes, flickering with a hint of calculation, finally softened as he spoke, his tone measured and deliberate. "A place to settle down, that hardly warrants a jug of grey water for just a week's worth of safety." Feng Qingde, naturally, did mistake his words for a show of kindness or generosity. She clicked her tongue lightly, inwardly marveling at the man's keen instincts befitting the leader of a powerful faction. Without pretense, she laid out the recent conflict with Kun and his men. Zhao Kun, that bastard. The man who escorted them here spat on the ground, his disdain palpable. Clearly, his grievances with Zhao Kun ran deep, their factions locked in a tenuous balance of mutual hostility. Feng Qingde felt a sliver of relief. She sighed at just the right moment, her voice tinged with weariness. "My younger sister is still so small. There are times when I simply can't protect her as well as I should, and now, with this enmity against Zhao Kun and his men, I thought it best to seek shelter under your protection, Master Zhang. My parents' old friends, after all, are within the base and can't always keep an eye on us." Though her words carried a note of supplication, Feng Qingde's demeanor remained composed, neither servile nor overly meek. Her calm dignity, even in the act of asking for help, did not escape Zhang Qingji's notice. He nodded to himself, silently approving. Of course, the grey water alone was reason enough for him to agree to take in the sisters. Zhao Kun and his ilk. They were a nuisance at best, hardly worth his concern. But taking in someone capable, perceptive, and well-connected was always preferable to sheltering a helpless damsel who would require constant care. With this thought, Zhang Qingji finally spoke, his tone firm. "Miss King, your sincerity is evident. I am not a miserly man. If I take your resources, I will guarantee your safety. You and your sister can settle here without worry. On my territory, Zhao Kun and his men won't dare act recklessly." That was it. He had agreed. Feng Qingde let out a quiet, almost imperceptible sigh of relief. She had feared that Zhang Qingji, overly cautious, might refuse to risk confrontation with the second largest faction outside the base. But as the leader of the most powerful faction, his confidence was well-founded, and her offer had been sufficient to make him spread his wings in protection. "We see," Feng Qingji turned to one of his men, ready to issue instructions, "arrange a place for Miss King and her sister." His words were abruptly interrupted by a voice, hurried and anxious. "Master Zhang, I have a request to make ye. King Luan child, what are you doing here? The newcomers were a middle-aged couple, their faces lined with worry. But the moment their eyes landed on King Luan, their expressions softened, relief washing over them like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Fan Qingde froze for a moment, her gaze dropping to the little girl at her side. King Luan's eyes lit up faintly at the sight of the couple, though she remained tucked behind Fan Qingde, hesitant but not entirely withdrawn. That flicker of recognition, however, was enough for Fan Qingde to discern that the three were acquainted and that King Luan harbored some measure of trust toward them. She studied the couple more closely, sifting through the original owner's memories for a match. "Old Lu, what's the matter?" Zhang Chengji's tone toward the couple was uncharacteristically warm, even tinged with familiarity. Clearly, they were not just acquaintances, but trusted allies. Fan Qingde's brows twitched as a memory clicked into place. She finally recalled who they were. In the past, when the original owner had been unable to provide for King Luan, she had entrusted the girl to this very couple after careful consideration. The couple had been kind, offering guidance to the original owner during her early, aimless scavenging attempts. Their consistent goodwill had earned the original owner's trust, leading her to leave King Luan in their care. Now, with the outer zone freshly ravaged by a beast attack that had claimed countless lives, the couple's hurried visit to Zhang Chengji could only mean one thing: they were worried about King Luan's safety and had come seeking help. Sure enough, the man called Old Lu waved his hand dismissively, his voice tinged with relief. "Nothing now, nothing at all. We were just worried about King Luan. My wife and I ran up to look for her the moment we heard the commotion, but the crowd from the outer zone blocked us from getting through. Once the ability wielders finished clearing the area, we searched everywhere but couldn't find her. With no other options, we thought to ask Master Zhang for help." His gaze on King Luan was tender, his voice gentle, revealing a genuine affection for the child. Fan Qingde couldn't help but feel a pang of emotion. In this wasteland, where humanity had been ground down to numbness and cruelty by the harsh environment, kindness was a rare and precious thing. The basest treatment of ordinary people was cold and callous, only deepening her initial resentment toward this time and place. But seeing Old Lu and his wife now, her heart softened, her perspective shifting ever so slightly. No matter how harsh the world, there would always be those who held fast to their humanity. Whether it was their past guidance to the original owner or their current concern for King Luan, the couple's character shone through. This was a debt Fan Qingde would not forget. When the couple learned that Fan Qingde planned to bring King Luan to Zhang Chengji's territory, their surprise quickly gave way to joy. "This is wonderful. You sisters won't have to be separated, and will still get to see King Luan often." Old Lu's wife, her gaze soft and maternal, beamed at King Luan. "Since they're your acquaintances, Old Lu, you can handle their arrangements," Zhang Chengji said, his tone accommodating. "I believe there's an empty house near yours. That spot should do nicely." It was no small favor. The couple's residence, nestled against the base's walls, was among the safest in the outer zone, a coveted location. Many would have given anything to secure such a spot. Whether it was due to the weekly grade of water or out of respect for the couple, Fan Qingde had undoubtedly gained an advantage. With the couple's help, the sisters quickly settled in. Their new home was still a shack, barely 5 or 6 square meters, its walls riddled with gaps that let the wind howl through. Inside, there was only a rickety bed made from beast bones. Ignoring Fan Qingde's polite refusals, Old Lu swiftly reinforced the shack, hammering it into something that, while still humble, looked sturdy enough to last a while longer. His wife brought over a set of old furniture, a table, chairs, and a few battered pots and pans. "You moved in such a hurry, you probably didn't have time to bring these things. They're old, but if you don't mind, you can use them for now," she said, her gaze lingering warmly on King Luan, her voice as gentle as a lullaby. Fan Qingde, indeed in need of the items, accepted them graciously, already calculating how to repay the couple in the future. For the first time, King Luan, who had been silent and clinging to Fan Qingde's side, stepped forward. "Uncle Lu and Tai Lu, thank you for taking care of me." The little girl's voice was sweet and clear, her bow earnest and polite. Old Lust's wife's eyes reddened instantly, her hands trembling as she reached out to stroke King Llewellyn's hair, her affection overflowing. With a resolute expression, she dug into her worn satchel and produced 3 nutrient vials. "Take these, they are for King Llewellyn. A child mustn't go hungry." Though Feng Qingde tried to refuse, the woman's insistence left her no choice but to accept, silently vowing to repay the kindness one day. After bidding farewell to Uncle Lu and his wife, Feng Qingde, accompanied by King Llewellyn, swept through the newly built shack with a resigned efficiency. The place was bare, its emptiness echoing like a hollow drum. They ate a few scraps of food, just enough to stave off hunger, and climbed onto the rough, splintered wooden planks that served as their bed. Sleep was not a luxury, but a necessity, and exhaustion claimed them almost immediately. The night had been chaos, a maelstrom of terror and confusion as they fled from the monstrous beasts that had descended upon them. Feng Qingde's body, already frail and worn, now felt like a brittle shell, her strength drained to its last reserves. Even so, she managed only 2 hours of shallow, restless sleep before her eyes snapped open. The pull of the jade pendant was irresistible, a silent, insistent call she could no longer ignore. This time, she did merely send her consciousness into the pendant space. Ensuring that King Llewellyn was still sound asleep, she allowed her entire body to be enveloped by its otherworldly embrace. A brief wave of dizziness swept over her, but it passed quickly, replaced by the soft, almost tender sensation of cool grass beneath her feet. The air here was a balm, pure, gentle, and utterly unlike the choking grit of the wasteland outside. The atmosphere wrapped around her like a long-lost lover, soothing her battered skin and parched lungs. Even the lingering injuries of the body's previous owner seemed to ease, their pain fading to a distant memory. She inhaled deeply, greedily, as if she could drink in the very essence of this place. Only when her breathing steadied did she begin to explore, her steps buoyed by a mix of exhilaration and disbelief. She followed the stream, its clear waters waving a silver path through the endless expanse of grass. Time seemed to stretch and blur as she walked, the horizon always just out of reach. The sheer vastness of the space thrilled her, yet there was a pang of disappointment too. Aside from the grass and the stream, the only other feature was the lone, withered tree she had seen upon entering. No animals, no other plant, just silence so profound it pressed against her ears. Her thoughts drifted back to the tree, and in a blink, she found herself standing beneath its gnarled branches once more. Startled, she realized she had somehow teleported, her body responding to her thoughts without conscious effort. A grin spread across her face as she began to test this newfound ability, flitting from one corner of the space to another in a dizzying game of hide and seek with herself. The novelty of it all was intoxicating, and it wasn't until her legs gave out beneath her that she returned to the tree, collapsing at its base with a contented sigh. So vast and yet still no end in sight, she murmured, her voice tinged with both wonder and frustration. The space was a treasure, a sanctuary, but its emptiness gnawed at her. It felt wrong, wasteful, to leave such fertile ground barren. The instinct to cultivate, to plant and grow, was as ingrained in her as the marrow in her bones. But this was the age of desolation, a time when seeds of wheat and rice were relics of a lost world. What plants remained were mutants, twisted, venomous things as likely to kill as to nourish. Still, Feng Qingde was not one to surrender easily. Ideas churned in her mind, each more desperate than the last. Perhaps the base would hold the answer. Its trading halls and black market stalls were chaotic, but brimming with oddities. What others deemed worthless might yet prove invaluable to her. After all, her time reversal ability could breathe life into what was broken, coaxing a second spring from even the most withered husks. Her gaze shifted back to the tree, its charred, skeletal form standing defiant against the verdant backdrop. A phoenix reborn, nesting in the embrace of a parasol tree, was that how the legends went? The thought sparked a flicker of hope. This tree, so intimately tied to the jade pendant and the space itself, might hold secrets worth uncovering. Steeling herself, she decided to gamble. The nutrient solution gifted by Uncle Lu was enough to last a few days, she could afford this risk. Closing her eyes, she channeled the remaining energy of her time reversal skill into the tree. The world seemed to hold its breath as a faint green light enveloped the trunk. Slowly, hesitantly, a single bud emerged from a desiccated branch, unfurling into a tender, vibrant leaf. The air around her thickened, its soothing quality deepening, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Feng Qingdai's body felt whole. Even the invisible reservoir of her skill replenished itself, the energy surging back with a vigor that left her breathless. She laughed, a sound of pure, unrestrained joy, and slapped her palm against the bark. More, she demanded, eager to push the limits of this miraculous discovery. But the tree remained inert, her ability unable to penetrate it a second time. Frustration clawed at her as she tried again and again, each failure a bitter reminder of the fleeting nature of her triumph. "Is it a one-time buff?" she muttered, her voice heavy with disappointment. The thought of such a high-yield opportunity slipping through her fingers was almost unbearable. Yet after exhausting every possibility, she had no choice but to concede. "Fine, tomorrow then." With a resigned sigh, she turned her attention to the task she had been avoiding, cleaning herself. The grime of the wasteland clung to her like a second skin, its stench a constant reminder of her fall from grace. She found a shallow pool downstream, and scrubbed herself raw, the water running black with dirt. Only when her skin felt clean, her body refreshed, did she allow herself to stop. Catching her reflection in the water, she froze. The face staring back at her was achingly familiar. "No wonder," she whispered, her voice trembling. It was her own face, unchanged from her previous life, a face she had thought lost forever. The same almond-shaped eyes, bright and mischievous, the same delicate lips, now pale but still soft. Even the dimples that appeared when she smiled were the same. Yet the harshness of this world had left its mark. Her skin was rough, her hair brittle and dull, a far cry from the pampered beauty she once was. A pang of longing pierced her heart, but she pushed it aside. Vanity was a luxury she could no longer afford. If she wanted to reclaim even a fraction of her former self, she would have to fight for it. Strength, she reminded herself. Strength would be her armor, her shield against the prying eyes and cruel intentions of this world. Dressing quickly, she stepped out of the space, her resolve hardened. King Luan was still asleep, her small form curled into a tight ball. Feng Qingdai rummaged through her bag, pulling out a tattered piece of cloth. She fashioned it into a crude headscarf, hiding her freshly washed hair and most of her face. Only her eyes remained visible, their sharp, calculating gleam undimmed. When King Luan finally stirred, she found her sister fully masked, a shadow of the woman she had known. But before she could question it, Feng Qingdai pounced, her hands quick and merciless as she stripped the girl of her filthy clothes. "Yeah." King Luan shrieked, her cheeks flaming red as she tried to shield herself. But Feng Qingdai was relentless, her determination as unyielding as the wasteland itself. The little girl still knew how to blush. Feng Qingdai watched King Luan with a radiant smile, her voice teasing yet affectionate. "Untied, let me wash you up." Before King Luan had even woken, Feng Qingdai had prepared a basin filled with water. The moment the cool, pristine liquid touched her skin, King Luan's already round eyes widened into perfect circles, gleaming like startled lamps. "Sister, this water is for washing." Her voice, though trembling with disbelief, was a hushed whisper, as if the very walls might betray them to the neighbors. Feng Qingdai sighed, a sound laden with 1,000 unspoken emotions, and marveled for the umpteenth time at King Luan's precociousness. A 4-year-old girl had she been in Feng Qingdai's original world would have been cherished, spoiled, and cradled in the palms of an entire family. To expect such maturity, such restraint, was unthinkable. But here, the harshness of the environment had forged the child into something far beyond her years. King Luan, noticing the sigh, stiffened. Her small face, so often bright with quiet determination, now clouded with worry. After a moment's consideration, she spoke, her tone solemn and deliberate. "Sister, don't worry. Whatever we have at home, I won't say a single word to anyone." Not a single word. Not a single question. Whether it was the rare, exquisite food Feng Qingde had produced in recent days, or the impossibly pure water, King Luan had never once pried. Her silence, her restraint, was almost painful to witness. Feng Qingde reached out, her fingers gently ruffling King Luan's hair. "You are incredible, King Luan," she said softly. "Keeping it to yourself is the right thing to do." Reassured by King Luan's discretion, Feng Qingde hesitated only briefly before making a decision. With a deep breath, she led King Luan into the space. It was a world unlike anything King Luan had ever seen. The grass underfoot was impossibly soft, a green so vivid it seemed to shimmer. A crystalline stream meandered through the landscape, its waters so clear they reflected the sky like a flawless mirror. At first, King Luan was startled, her small frame trembling slightly. But soon awe overtook fear, and she stood transfixed, her white eyes drinking in the scene. "It is," she whispered at last, her voice barely audible, "is this the immortal real mother told us about?" Their mother, Feng Qingde mother, in this body had been a lover of ancient legends, filling their childhood with tales of celestial beings and enchanted lands. To King Luan, who had known only the barren, ruthless wastelands, the stories had seemed like distant dreams, too far removed from her reality to truly imagine. But now standing here, it all made sense. This, surely, was that fabled place. Feng Qingde knelt beside her, washing away the grime that clung to King Luan's small frame. As she did, she spoke, her tone calm and deliberate, planting the seeds of belief. "Yes, this is the immortal realm. The immortals pitied us, King Luan. They gave us this blessing." She paused, letting the words sink in before continuing. "But remember, only I can open this place. No one else can enter. If anyone finds out, the immortals will be angry. They'll take it all away." King Luan's eyes grew even wider, if such a thing were possible. But isn't it dangerous to tell me?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and guilt. The thought of losing this miraculous gift, of returning to the hunger and despair of their old life, was unbearable. Feng Qingde smiled gently. "You're my family, King Luan. It's safe to tell you. But no one else must know." She had chosen to tell King Luan because she trusted her. The memories she had inherited, combined with these past few days of living together, had shown her that King Luan was not only obedient, but also fiercely loyal. The girl was shy, withdrawn, and rarely spoke to strangers. If told to keep a secret, she would guard it with her life. More importantly, Feng Qingde knew she couldn't hide her actions forever. She would be returning to this space often, bathing in its pure waters, and her sudden absences would inevitably raise questions. It was better to bring King Luan into the fold now than to risk a misunderstanding later. As she scrubbed King Luan's skin, layers of dirt sloughed away, the water beneath them darkening visibly. The once pristine stream now carried a murky trail of grime. King Luan watched the polluted water flow downstream, her small face thoughtful. After a moment, she spoke, her voice hesitant, but curious. "Sister, could we trade the dirty water for something useful?" Her question caught Feng Qingde off guard. For a moment, she stared, then burst into laughter, the sound ringing clear and bright. "King Luan, you're a little genius." She leaned down, planting a playful kiss on King Luan's cheek. The girl blushed, her lips curving into a shy smile, her eyes filled with a trust so pure it made Feng Qingde's heart ache. After finishing the bath, Feng Qingde dressed King Luan in a makeshift outfit, its patched fabric reminiscent of the wasteland's rugged aesthetic. Then, unable to suppress her excitement, she set to work. She gathered containers and began diluting the water. A handful of sand here, a rinse with some old, grimy jars there, and the once crystalline liquid transformed into something far less conspicuous. The result was a murky, yellowish fluid that bore an uncanny resemblance to the tea-grade water commonly traded in the base. In the wasteland, water was life. The base operated on a strict points system, and even a family with 2 ability users like the original Qingde parents could barely scrape by. A single liter of sea-grade water cost 5 points, and most families could only afford the bare minimum to survive. Hunger and thirst were constant companions, and death by dehydration was an all too common fate. Fine Kinde stared at the jars of sea-grade water, satisfaction blooming in her chest. This would work. It had to. But her triumph was short-lived. When she turned back, she found King Luan lying limply on the bed, her small face flushed an alarming shade of red. King Luan. Panic surged through her. She rushed to the girl's side, her voice trembling as she called her name. King Luan's eyes fluttered open, glassy and unfocused. "Sister," she murmured weakly, reaching out with trembling hands, seeking comfort. Fine Kinde gathered her into her arms, her mind racing. Teva. The girl was burning up, her skin hot enough to scald. The wasteland was no place for the sick. Medicine was scarce and prohibitively expensive, far beyond the meager 10 points Fine Kinde had left. And King Luan, her brave, stoic King Luan, must have been holding in her fear, her exhaustion, until it overwhelmed her. The bath, the sudden change in her environment, had likely tipped the fragile balance of her health. Fine Kinde pressed a damp cloth to King Luan's forehead, her hands trembling. After ensuring the girl was as comfortable as possible, she made a decision. She would find medicine, no matter the cost. Leaving King Luan in the care of a kindly neighbor, she grabbed 2 jars of her tea-grade water and stepped out into the unforgiving wasteland, her heart heavy, but resolute. Except for residents officially registered within the base, anyone else, including the destitute inhabitants of the shanty towns, was required to pay an entry fee of 2 points to gain access. For the shanty town dwellers, already teetering on the edge of survival, this was no small sum. Fine Kinde, for her part, had no immediate plans to enter the base. Her intention had been to score the shanty town for potential customers, to scrape together some semblance of capital before making any bold moves. But then, King Luan fell ill. A fever, nothing more than a cold, easily curable with a single vial of tea-grade medicine. Except, that vial cost 100 points. 100 points, a sum equal to an entire month's earnings for an average ability user. To scrape together that much in so little time, the shanty town was clearly a dead end. Its residents were as impoverished as she was, save for a handful of minor power players like Saint Changji, who might be able to scrounge up a few points. But Fine Kinde had only just settled into Saint Changji's territory with King Luan, and she had already managed to soar relations with Khan, the leader of the second most powerful faction. Now was not the time to draw attention to herself. Better to head straight for the base. The ability users there were flush with points, and she'd be able to scrape together the medicine money far more quickly. After enduring a round of questioning and paying the 2-point entry fee, Fine Kinde stepped into the base. Guided by the fragmented memories of the body's former owner, she soon found herself in the marketplace. The market was a chaotic sprawl of makeshift stalls, the kind that sprawled out on the ground like a patchwork quilt. It was all organized by the residents themselves, a haphazard bazaar with the atmosphere of a street-side vegetable market. The goods on display were eclectic, to say the least, a kaleidoscope of items ranging from the mundane to the bizarre. But their quality was uniformly mediocre cast-offs, leftovers, the kind of things the base itself had deemed unworthy of collection. Fine Kinde pulled her scarf tighter around her face, retreating to a shadowed corner where she could observe in silence. Her eyes scanned the crowd, lingering here, darting there. Minutes stretched into hours before she finally spotted her mark. A rotund, nimble figure flitted through the market like a restless bird, darting from stall to stall. One moment, he was haggling over prices in the east, the next he was pulling someone aside in the west. Every person he spoke to ended up being led to a secluded corner of the market. And every one of them, without fail, emerged from that corner wearing a satisfied smile. A middleman. That much was clear. A broker who thrived on connections, someone with a network of buyers and sellers at his fingertips. Fine Kinde's unrelenting gaze finally caught his attention. The man, more boy than man, really turned toward her, his small, sharp eyes narrowing as they landed on the 2 containers she cradled in her arms. A smile spread across his face, and he began to approach. But Fan Qingde raised a hand, palm outward, halting him in his tracks. She gestured toward the secluded corner had been frequenting and slipped away, her movements swift and deliberate. The alley between two buildings was narrow and dimly lit, the kind of place that reeked of damp stone and secrets. It wasn't much to look at, but it offered privacy, and more importantly, it had an exit at the other end. If things went south, there'd be two routes for a quick escape, a safety feature that Fan Qingde couldn't help but appreciate. Satisfied, she turned to face the boy who had followed her. "So, what's it going to be, miss, buying or selling?" he asked, his youthful face splitting into a grin that was equal parts charm and cunning. Up close, he couldn't have been more than 16 or 17, his boyish energy barely concealed beneath the veneer of a seasoned trader. Fan Qingde's voice was low, muffled by her scarf. "I've got a batch of water," she said, her words deliberate, measured. The boy's eyes widened, round as coins. Water. On the wasteland, water was more precious than gold, a resource so scarce it was almost mythical. Fan Qingde held out one of the containers, its surface worn and unassuming. The liquid inside, murky and dark, caught what little light the alley offered, its appearance more akin to sewage than anything potable. Even so, the boy's excitement was palpable. "I'll need to test it," he said, pulling a device from his pocket, a small, sleek instrument that looked like a cross between a thermometer and a wand. Fan Qingde raised an eyebrow. The sight of the device stirred a faint memory in her mind. "Not bad," she remarked dryly. "Carrying a tester like that around pretty professional." The boy grinned. "Comes with the territory." He plunged the device into the water, and after a few tense moments, a tiny light blinked on. He stared at the reading, his expression freezing for a fraction of a second. Fan Qingde's heart skipped a beat. Was there something wrong with the water? But then the boy scratched his head, his face clouded with confusion. "Wait," he muttered. "It looks like C-grade water, but the reading says B-grade. Must be a glitch." Relief washed over her like a cool breeze. B-grade. That was manageable. If the water had tested as a grade, she wouldn't have dared to sell it, not with the risk of attracting unwanted attention. "It's nothing special," she said, her tone pointed. "No need to make a fuss." The boy's eyes started toward the alley's exit, his expression sly. "Got it," he said, his voice laced with a knowing humor. Fan Qingde almost laughed. Middlemen like him had likely seen their fair share of shady dealings, people repurposing supplies or siphoning off resources meant for the collective good. He wouldn't ask questions. He was here to make a profit, not to play detective. "Name your price," she said, cutting to the chase. "I've got more where this came from. If the deal's good, we'll do business again." The boy's eyes gleamed. He hesitated for a moment, then said, "It's B-grade quality, sure, but the appearance, definitely C-grade. No way I can sell it as anything higher. And since you came to me," he added with a grin, "I'm guessing you can't exactly sell this out in the open, right?" Fan Qingde cut him off with a wave of her hand. 10 points per liter. Take it or leave it." The boy balked, his grin faltering. 10 points? That's insane. Even proper B-grade water only goes for 10 points on the resale market, and this stuff, look at it. It's practically sludge. He plastered on a smile, the kind that begged for leniency. "Come on, sister, let's be reasonable here, in trying to help you out, but we've got to negotiate." Sister. The word grated on her nerves, triggering a flood of memories she'd rather have left buried. Her younger brother in her previous life, all puppy dog eyes and wheedling tones, had used the exact same tactic whenever he needed money or had gotten himself into trouble. She clenched her jaw. 10 points, no less, she snapped, her voice like steel. Then, without waiting for a response, she turned on her heel, cradling the container as she made to leave. Wait. The boy scrambled after her, his voice rising in desperation. 9 points, 9 points per liter, okay, deal. Yo. Fan Qingde stopped so abruptly that the boy nearly stumbled into her. As he looked up at her, his face a mix of relief and regret, she allowed herself the faintest of smiles. Inwardly, he was kicking himself. Damn it. Should have started lower. The chubby man's expression was utterly deflated, his face drooping like a wilted leaf under the weight of disappointment. Out here on the wasteland, where survival was a daily negotiation with death, he had never encountered someone like Feng Qingde, who bargained with such ruthless finality one word of disagreement, and should simply walk away. Feng Qingde herself had expected haggling to be this easy in such a savage land. She had barely made her opening move, and the man had already surrendered, armor and all. For a moment, she couldn't help but second-guess herself. Had she set the price too low? The two of them stood there, eyes locked, a silent battle of wills. But it was Feng Qingde who broke the stalemate, her voice crisp and decisive. I have 20 liters of water at home. Can you take it all? 20 liters. Enough to make anyone's heart skip a beat. Calculated at 9 points per liter, it would fetch 180 points sufficient to buy a tea-grade potion and still leave some change. It was that Feng Qingde did want to sell more water to amass funds, rather, this was her first interaction with the chubby man, and she knew better than to show all her cards at once. 20 liters of B-grade water, neither too much nor too little. It was a test, a pebble thrown into the pond to gauge the ripples. If the market reacted calmly, she could consider more daring moves later. After all, the wasteland was nothing like the modern world she had once known. It was rougher, more brutal, a place where even the most delicate flower had to grow thorns to survive. Feng Qingde, newly transplanted into this harsh soil, knew she needed time to adapt. The chubby man's face lit up with astonishment, his earlier gloom vanishing as if swept away by a sudden gust of wind. His small eyes widened into perfect circles, his voice trembling with disbelief. 20 liters. You can really get your hands on 20 liters of water of this quality? Feng Qingde frowned slightly, rummaging through the fragmented memories of the body's original owner. When she recalled that the Xuanma base's monthly allocation of B-grade water was only 500 liters, a sense of relief washed over her. Caution had been the right choice. Internal channels, she answered vaguely, her tone deliberately dismissive, offering no further explanation. The chubby man's eyes flickered with a mix of envy and resignation, and he muttered under his breath, as expected, resources are always in the hands of the powerful. Feng Qingde nodded in agreement. B-grade water was unlimited, anyone could buy it as long as they had the points. Grade water, however, was restricted to 500 liters per month, and A-grade water a mere 200 liters monthly. Of course, those limits applied only to the public. The upper echelons of the base surely had access to additional quotas. Seeing Feng Qingde nod as if it were the most natural thing in the world, the chubby man gritted his teeth, silently cursing her as a resource hog. I'll take it, all of it, he declared, his voice firm. Relief that the chubby man could handle the quantity, Feng Qingde exhaled softly. After sifting through her memories twice, she selected a discreet location for the exchange, a barren patch of land behind the base's official hospital, close enough to the market yet rarely frequented. She and the chubby man agreed on the time and place. With that settled, Feng Qingde left the alley, her mind already turning to the next task, finding a container large enough to hold 20 liters of water. Her goal clear, she quickly located what she needed in the market, a wooden basin. Its surface was pockmarked with dents, and 2 gaping holes rendered it utterly unusable. This, you want to buy this? The vendor looked at her, bewildered. I've been using it as a stool, but if you're willing to pay a point, it's yours. Without hesitation, he dragged the battered basin up from under his stall. A new wooden basin would have cost 5 or 6 points. 1 point for this wreck. A steal. Satisfied, Feng Qingde took the basin in one hand and cradled 2 small jars in the other, disappearing into the crowd. She weaved through the market's labyrinthine alleys, her movements careful and deliberate. Only when she was certain no one was following did she slip into the desolate clearing behind the hospital. After confirming she was alone, Feng Qingde activated her time reversal ability, restoring the wooden basin to its former glory. Though the basin appeared large, Its structural simplicity meant the energy required for its repair was only a third of what she usually spent fixing smaller items. Her eyes sparkled with delight at the discovery of this new efficiency in her ability. With the basin mended, she used the leather water pouch she carried to draw water from her spatial storage. The pouch held 1 liter at a time, with the 2 jars containing 4 liters in total. She only needed to draw 16 more. Once the basin was filled, Fang Qingde began her next task. Scooping up handfuls of yellow sand and grime from the ground, she scattered them into the crystal-clear water. She stirred the mixture thoroughly, ensuring the water's appearance matched the gritty, imperfect quality expected of wasteland resources. Only when the murkiness seemed just right did she stop. When the chubby man arrived, the sight of the basin, brimming with water, left him momentarily stunned. After confirming the water's quality, he eagerly prepared to lift the basin, only to have Fang Qingde block him with an outstretched hand. "Bring your own container," she said flatly. The chubby man blinked in disbelief, pointing at the basin and jars. "You are really going to haggle over these few containers?" Fang Qingde's brow furrowed. "What do you mean? Business is business. Every bit of profit counts." He paused, then reluctantly acknowledged the logic, though he couldn't help but think she was being a bit stingy. "Fine. How much for the lot?" he asked through gritted teeth. Fang Qingde considered for a moment. 5 points for the basin, 2 points per jar. His face flushed red, but he transferred 189 points to her wristband without further argument. With the points secured, Fang Qingde could hardly wait to head to the hospital and purchase the tea-grade potion. The image of King Luan's flushed, feverish face lingered in her mind, her eyes glazed and lifeless. Fang Qingde's heart tugged with urgency. "Hey, wait!" The chubby man called after her just as she was about to leave. His expression was earnest. "This water source, will there be more in the future? Can I get your contact info? It'd make things easier." Fang Qingde hesitated, then shook her head. "If I have more to sell, I'll find you at the market. You're there often, right?" For now the partnership was too new for her to trust him further. Besides, she preferred to stay in the shadows, observing how the market reacted to this initial sale. While withholding her contact information, she retained control, a safer approach in these uncertain times. Though disappointed, the chubby man did press the issue. He simply told her to come find him whenever she needed. After bidding him farewell, Fang Qingde headed straight for the hospital. Potion in hand, she then returned to the market. Earlier, while searching for a water container, she had noticed a few items that seemed promising. Since her route out of the city passed through the market, she figured she might as well see if she could acquire them. "Ma'am, these bags are too damaged. The text and patterns are almost completely worn away. The base won't even take them for research. Why are you interested in these?" Fang Qingde was crouched in front of a stall, examining a stack of plastic packaging, when the chubby man's voice startled her. Looking up, she saw him scolding the vendor. "One Jao, don't you dare try to scam my sister." The vendor, a man in his 40s, looked sheepish. "Brother Mo, I didn't know she was your sister. I was trying to scam her. She asked about the price herself." Fang Qingde's face twitched. A vendor old enough to be her father was calling the chubby man Brother Mao. And by extension, she had somehow become sister. Whatever. In the wasteland, one couldn't afford to get hung up on titles. "It's fine, little little Mao. I actually need these," she said, picking up the stack of plastic bags. Inside, she was grinning ear to ear. In her hands, even trash could be reborn. Who knew what treasures might emerge from restoring these scraps? Thanks to little Mao's intervention, she acquired the entire stack, nearly 100 bags, for just 2 points. With her purchases complete, Fang Qingde returned home, a spring in her step, clutching the potion and her newfound trash like trophies. When Fang Qingde returned home, she was startled to find Aunt Lu cradling King Luan on the edge of her narrow bed. Aunt Lu's eyes were rimmed with red, her face pale and drawn, as though she had slept in days. Her entire demeanor seemed fractured, teetering on the brink of collapse. Alarmed, Qingde called out, her voice sharp with concern. "Aunt Lu, what's going on?" The woman flinched at the sound, as if shaken from some dark reverie. When her gaze landed on Kinde, a flicker of desperate hope ignited in her expression. "Kinde, don't worry, don't be scared," she stammered, her words tumbling over one another. "I've sent your Uncle Lu out to get medicine. King Luan will be fine, she will be fine." Her voice cracked, the assertion sounding more like a plea to herself than reassurance for Kinde. Something was off. Kinde's heart tightened as she stepped closer, reaching out to take King Luan from Aunt Lu's arms. But Aunt Lu clung to the child with a ferocity that bordered on desperation. When Kinde extended her hands further, Aunt Lu instinctively turned her body away, shielding the child. "Aunt Lu." Kinde's voice rose, firm yet measured, cutting through the tension like the snap of a taut string. The older woman froze mid-motion, her resistance faltering. "I have medicine here," Kinde said, her tone softening, but still resolute. "Give King Luan to me, I'll make sure she takes it." King Luan, who had been restless since Kinde left, opened her eyes at the sound of her sister's voice. The little girl's face, flushed with fever, crumpled with a mix of relief and exhaustion. She stretched out her small arms, reaching for Kinde with a pitiful, wordless plea. The sight seemed to snap Aunt Lu out of her daze. Her grip loosened, and the wild, frantic light in her eyes dimmed, replaced by quiet, weary resignation. "Medicine, yes medicine," she murmured, almost to herself. Reluctantly, she handed King Luan over, her hands lingering for a moment longer than necessary. Settling King Luan against her chest, Kinde wasted no time. She sat on the edge of the bed and carefully poured the pale green liquid into a small spoon, coaxing it into her sister's mouth. The bitter scent of the medicine hung in the air, sharp and acrid, but King Luan obediently swallowed, her trust in Kinde absolute. "Good girl," Kinde murmured, brushing a damp strand of hair from King Luan's flushed forehead. "Drink the medicine and rest. Once you wake up, you'll feel much better." Her voice was a soothing lullaby, a promise wrapped in warmth. "I won't leave again today, I'll stay right here with you." Reassured by her sister's words, King Luan curled up on the bed, her small body sinking into the thin mattress. Within moments, her breathing evened out, and she drifted into a fitful, fevered sleep. With King Luan settled, Kinde turned her attention back to Aunt Lu, who remained rooted in the cramped room, her gaze fixed on the child with an unsettling intensity. But her focus wasn't truly on King Luan, it was as if she were looking through her, at someone else entirely. When their eyes met, Aunt Lu forced a brittle smile, though tears glistened at the corners of her eyes. "I'm sorry, Kinde," she said, her voice thick with sorrow. "I lost my composure today." Kinde did respond immediately, sensing there was more to come. Aunt Lu hesitated, then continued, her words heavy with the weight of long-buried grief. "Your uncle and I, we once had a daughter. She was about King Luan's age." Her voice faltered, the rest left unsaid, but Kinde understood. The pieces clicked into place. The kindness Aunt Lu and Uncle Lu had shown their unsolicited advice, their willingness to take King Luan in wasn't mere charity. It was a salve for an old wound, a way to fill the void left by the child they had lost. But their actions went beyond simple compensation. When King Luan had gone missing during the chaos of the beast attack, they had defied the panicked crowds, risking their own safety to search for her. They had even pleaded with Saint Chengchi, a man known for his ruthlessness, to help. Their love for King Luan was genuine, as deep and fierce as if she were their own. Kinde exhaled slowly, her chest tight with a mix of gratitude and melancholy. "There's nothing to apologize for, Aunt Lu," she said gently, steering the conversation away from painful memories. "You've cared for King Luan like she was your own. I should be the one thanking you." Before Aunt Lu could respond, Uncle Lu burst into the room, his face flushed from exertion. In his hand was a vial of medicine, its vibrant green glow unmistakably a tea-grade potion, rare and expensive. Kinde's heart skipped a beat. For ordinary ability users, earning even 100 or 200 points in a month was an uphill battle. For Aunt and Uncle Lu, who were regular folks living in the ramshackle outskirts of the base, scraping together enough for daily meals was already a struggle. The cost of this potion, likely 100 points, must have emptied their meager savings. The realization hit her like a blow. Even if their actions were driven by the memory of their daughter, their sacrifice for King Luan was no less profound. Uncle Lu, Qingde began, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions churning within her. I should have told you before I left. He already bought medicine for King Luan, but he'll still take this one. She's young, and it's always good to have something on hand for emergencies. She couldn't let their goodwill go unacknowledged, nor could she bear to see their sacrifice wasted. But Uncle Lu waved her off, shaking his head firmly. That won't do. If King Luan's already been treated, there's no need for this. We bought it of our own accord. You shouldn't have to bear the cost. Anla nodded in agreement, already stepping toward the door as if to leave. Qingde acted quickly, her movements swift and decisive. Before they could protest further, she grabbed Anla's identity bracelet and transferred 100 points into her account. The transaction was instant, irreversible. Her heart clenched at the thought of her dwindling balance. After selling water and other goods, she had managed to scrape together just over 200 points. Between the potion she had purchased earlier and this new expense, she was left with a paltry 3 points. Barely enough to scrape by. But she didn't let her distress show. Smiling brightly, she held up the vial as if it were a trophy. It's settled, then. I'll keep this for King Luan. You've already done so much, let me do this one small thing in return. Uncle and Aunt Lu exchanged helpless looks, clearly torn. But before they could argue further, Qingde darted into her small home, bolting the door behind her. King Luan's still sleeping, she called out through the thin wooden barrier, her tone light and teasing. Let's not wake her, okay? Outside, the couple lingered for a moment, their murmured conversation barely audible. She's a stubborn one, Uncle Lu said with a sigh. But I suppose it's better this way. At least we know she's looking out for King Luan. Aunt Lu nodded, though her expression remained troubled. Still, where did she get the points for all this? She's just a young girl. I hope she's not overextending herself. Their voices faded as they walked away, leaving Qingde alone in the quiet. Leaning against the door, she finally allowed herself a moment to breathe. The weight of her near-empty account pressed heavily on her, but she pushed the thought aside. There was no use dwelling on it now. Instead, she turned her attention to the plastic bags she had brought back earlier. They were her only hope for replenishing her resources. Rolling up her sleeves, she surveyed the pile with determination. These so-called blind boxes might have been discarded by others, but to her they were treasures waiting to be uncovered. Her hands itched with anticipation. Whatever lay hidden inside, she was ready to make the most of it. After a night's rest, feeling her energy bar restored ever so slightly, Fang Qingde leapt out of bed with an eagerness that bordered on desperation. Her first instinct was to check on King Luan. She pressed a hand to the girl's forehead, the warmth reassuringly absent now. Only then did she allow herself to relax, slipping off the bed with a quiet exhale of relief. From a pile of plastic scraps, she began her ritual of selection, fingers sifting through the jagged remnants as if searching for buried treasure. At last, she pulled out the first lucky winner. It was a small, battered shard of red plastic, its once vivid surface faded and scarred by the relentless passage of time. Barely the length of half a knuckle, it was so worn that its original form was utterly unrecognizably ghost of its former self. But this was par for the course. Everything she scavenged was like this, shapeless and ruined. There was no point in judging by appearances. What it was, she would only know once it was restored. Closing her eyes, she steadied her breath, her mind honing in on a single command: restore to perfect condition. The fragment in her hand began to vibrate, emitting a faint, brittle crackle. Before her very eyes, it started to transform. The red deepened, growing richer and more vivid as the shard elongated, reshaping itself with an almost hypnotic fluidity. When it reached the length of her palm, its purpose became apparent to handle. Her heart skipped, a jolt of adrenaline surging through her veins. She channeled more energy into the restoration, her focus sharpening. And then, with a sudden flash of silver at one end, it became clear. It was a knife. but not like the tiny, ornamental dagger King Luan carried, the one her father had passed down to her. No, this was something far more substantial. The blade stretched nearly 20 centimeters, a far cry from the diminutive 8-centimeter weapon that was barely useful for a sneak attack, let alone piercing the height of a mutant beast. A humble kitchen knife, perhaps, but in this desolate wasteland where threats lurked in every shadow and weapons were prohibitively expensive, it felt like a windfall. For the first time in what felt like forever, Fang Qingde felt a flicker of security, fragile but present. Weighed by her success, she couldn't resist diving back into the pile for her next project. She plucked another piece, brimming with anticipation. But as the plastic reassembled itself, her excitement gave way to disbelief. "This I can't," she muttered, staring at the small, restored packet of food-grade desiccant in her hand. The absurdity of it all left her momentarily speechless. In the arid, sandstorm-battered expanse of the Chuanwu base, where the air itself seemed intent on desiccating every living thing, what use was a moisture absorber? Setting the useless item aside with a resigned sigh, she reached for another fragment, only to find her energy utterly drained. It was disheartening. She hadn't even been awake long, and already her reserves were depleted. 2 restorations, that was all she could manage before exhaustion claimed her abilities. She exhaled, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. To rely on her time reversal skill for survival, how long would it take before she could truly eat her fill, clothe herself warmly, and live without fear? Years. Decades. But then a thought struck her of memory from the day before. The phoenix tree wood in her spatial dimension. The experiment had been impulsive, a shot in the dark. She had poured energy into the charred wood, and in return, it had given her a cool, rejuvenating sensation, replenishing her reserves by a significant margin. Yet after that initial exchange, the tree had refused to absorb any more. Curiosity rekindled, she decided to investigate further. With nothing else to do while her energy recovered, she stepped into the sanctuary of her space. The moment she entered, her body felt lighter, freer, as though the cloying filth of the wasteland had been stripped away at the threshold. The realization sparked an idea. If her space could purify the oppressive miasma of the outside world, could it also cleanse the objects she brought into it? In the Xuanwu base, purification was a necessity. Everything, be it scavenged goods, hunted mutant beasts, or even water, had to be cleansed of harmful contaminants before use. The base's purification machines were indispensable, and the ability to replicate that process, even partially, could be a game changer. Her mind raced with possibilities. If her space could truly purify, she might have a way to earn credits. But for now, her focus returned to the phoenix tree. She placed her hand against its shared bark, sending a tentative pulse of energy through her palm. To her delight, the tree responded, its surface glowing faintly green. It worked again. Perhaps the tree had a daily absorption limit. The thought barely registered as she watched, entranced, while new buds emerged from its gnarled branches. One then another. By the end, 2 fresh leaves had unfurled, their tender green a stark contrast to the blackened wood. With their growth came the same cool, soothing energy as before, flowing into her like a gentle tide. It was exhilarating. The replenishment was enough to restore her reserves to the point where she could attempt 3 or 4 more restorations. Overcome with excitement, she impulsively hugged the tree, planting a triumphant kiss on its sparkling terraquil immediately, sputtering. "Of charcoal," she exclaimed, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. The scorched taste lingered, acrid and unpleasant, and she hurried to the stream to wash it away. Her reflection in the water made her laugh despite herself. Soot streaked her face, a comical reminder of her overzealous enthusiasm. Just then, a sound from outside the space pulled her attention. King Luan was awake. Fang Qingde stepped out of the space, greeted by the sight of the little girl's radiant smile. "Big sister," King Luan called, her voice as sweet as honey. Fang Qingde gathered her into a hug, her tone soft and full of concern. "How are you feeling? Any discomfort?" King Luan tilted her head in mock seriousness, considering the question. Nope, I feel great. So much energy. Fan Qingde studied her closely. It was true the girl's complexion had improved dramatically. Her once sallow face now tinged with a healthy flush. It was the medicine. No, this was something else. The space. The thought struck her with clarity. King Luan had bathed in the space's water, and perhaps, just perhaps, the space had cleansed her of the wasteland's accumulated toxins. If that was the case, then the girl's earlier fever made sense. A temporary reaction to the sudden purity of her body. The implications were staggering. Her musings were interrupted by a knock at the door. Qingde, are you home? It was Uncle Lu. Opening the door, she greeted him with King Luan perched on her hip. In here. What's the matter, Uncle Lu? His gaze immediately sought King Luan, softening with relief when he saw her improved state. I came to ask if you'd like to join the team heading into the wasteland tomorrow. Boss Zhang took on a mission to collect killer vines, and the pay's decent. Fan Qingde knew this offer wasn't standard. She'd only joined Zhang Chenji's team a few days ago, and they had no obligation to include her in such tasks. This was likely Uncle Lu pulling strings out of concern for her well-being. Her answer was immediate. Echo. Opportunity and danger were two sides of the same coin, and she needed both to test her limits, and to earn the credits she so desperately lacked. Good, he ready to leave at dawn. To embark on a mission beyond the perimeter required meticulous preparation, a truth that Fan Qingde understood all too well. She had carefully calibrated her energy reserves for the day, painstakingly scavenging to restore a few precious items. A bar of chocolate enough to sustain the body's caloric needs. A small loaf of bread barely sufficient to stave off hunger. The remaining energy, however, was not squandered on predictable trifles like snacks. Instead, she turned to a pile of battered, sun-warped plastic, picking two more candidates for restoration from the heap, as though selecting lucky winners from a grim lottery. The first item to emerge from the haze of decay was a plastic cup, functional, perhaps, but dishearteningly mundane. Fan Qingde sighed, her enthusiasm dimmed. It felt reckless, almost foolhardy, to expend precious energy on these unrecognizable remnants of a bygone era. If fortune turned its back, she risked wasting an entire day's worth of energy on trivialities like desiccants or water bottles. The safest method, of course, was to seek out objects with high structural integrity, those adorned with legible text or discernible pattern items that hinted at their former utility. Unfortunately, such treasures were swiftly claimed by the base, leaving scavengers like her to sift through the dregs. But this mission, undertaken alongside Uncle Lu and his team, presented an opportunity. Perhaps, out there in the desolation, she might uncover something of real value. Even so, the gamble was steep. Yet Fan Qingde wasn't entirely without resources. She still had 3 nutrient vials gifted by Uncle Lu on the day she had settled into the base. With a modest stockpile to fall back on, she decided she could afford to indulge in a few more rounds of this high-stakes game of chance. So, with a mix of trepidation and resolve, she directed her remaining energy toward yet another forlorn scrap. Slowly, the object began to reconstitute itself, its form growing clearer, more defined. Her breath caught. Is this, she murmured, her fingers trembling as recognition dawned. It was Yan'anbei, a relic of the old world. Its reputation as a miraculous salve for wounds and swelling was legendary. To call it the holy grail of surgery would hardly be an exaggeration. In this barren wasteland, where medicine was priced like gold and hoarded like treasure, stumbling upon a bottle of Yan'anbei felt like unearthing a vein of pure silver. Excitement surged through her, a jubilant cry threatening to escape her lips, but she clamped her hand over her mouth just in time. With this in her arsenal, she felt a new surge of confidence about the mission ahead. The following morning, Fan Qingde entrusted her younger sister, King Luan, to Atlas care. Missions beyond the base were no place for a child, and though she harbored her doubts about many, Aunt Lu and her husband had proven themselves trustworthy thus far. She left behind 2 nutrient vials and a jug of purified water for King Luan. then joined Uncle Le's team at the Rendezvous Point. The missions issued by the base were typically graded or tasks manageable for ordinary people, given the inherent dangers of the wasteland. This time, Feng Chengji had accepted its E-level assignment, retrieving the vines of the so-called killer creeper. The reward was 2 points per 10 pounds, no limit on quantity. The killer creeper was a mutated plant, its sinewy, sand-colored tendrils lying in wait beneath the soil. When it sensed prey, it would lash out, coiling around its victim with the ferocity of a striking serpent. Its writhing, claw-like vines bore an unsettling resemblance to sand snakes, their movements as hypnotic as they were terrifying. Art, however, was its Achilles heel. A simple torch was enough to send it retreating in haste. With adequate preparation, the mission was dangerous, but far from insurmountable. Feng Chengji's team was the only one eyeing the prize. As Feng Qingde and her companions moved beyond the ramshackle outskirts of the base, they crossed paths with Xiao Kan and his crew. The moment Xiao Kan's gaze landed on her, his expression twisted into something venomous, his eyes gleaming with a hatred so visceral it was almost tangible. It was the kind of look that could curdle blood, raw and feral. To him, their grudge was a wound that would never scab over. Beside him stood a man missing a thumb, his stare equally malevolent, as though he were mentally cataloging the myriad ways he might exact revenge. Feng Qingde, however, merely quirked an eyebrow, her expression one of wry exasperation. Her first mission outside the base, and she had already run into not one but 2 sworn enemies. Xiao Kan's sneer was as oily as his words. Pretending to be some pure, untouchable maiden, and yet here you are, clinging to Feng Chengji like a parasite to move into the inner district. His insinuating tone made Feng Qingde's skin crawl, his gaze slithering over her like a damp, unclean thing. She shivered, repulsed, but held her tongue for Feng Chengji's sake. Instead, she responded with a scathing smile and a barb that cut deep. Why don't you call your master over to speak with our leader? After all, who are you to bark like a dog at us? Feng Chengji chuckled, clearly amused by her audacity. He squared his shoulders, adopting the imperious demeanor she had just bestowed upon him, and led their group forward without sparing Xiao Kan and his lackeys a second glance. Though the tension between the 2 groups crackled like static electricity, neither dared escalate matters. Not here, not now. The base's rules were clear, no large-scale conflicts within its boundaries. Out in the wasteland, however, it would be a different story. There, grievances could be settled without restraint. Feng Qingde smirked, glancing back over her shoulder. Sure enough, Velkan and his crew were still glaring daggers at her. She raised a hand and drew it slowly across her throat in a mocking gesture. Their faces flushed with rage, but they held their ground, unwilling to act under Feng Chengji's watchful eye. The feud between them was irreconcilable, a knot too tangled to unravel. Feng Qingde had no intention of making peace. Every taunt, every provocation, was calculated to stoke the flames of their animosity. In her world, danger wasn't something to endure, it was something to eliminate, root and stem. And if the opportunity arose, she wouldn't hesitate to extinguish the threat Xiao Kan posed. Feng Chengji, for his part, observed her antics with a knowing look but said nothing. He had been aware of the bad blood between her and Xiao Kan when he had taken her and her sister under his wing. The enmity between their factions was long-standing, a simmering conflict that needed little provocation to boil over. The team's resources were impressive, boasting 2 sand, but rare luxuries in this desolate expanse. 16 people, including Feng Qingde, crammed into the vehicles, the scene resembling a chaotic parade from a distant, war-torn land. Agile as ever, Feng Qingde secured herself a seat, avoiding the indignity of clinging to the side. For over 2 hours, the buggies sped across the wasteland, the barren landscape blurring past in shades of ochre and gray. At last, they came to a halt. About 5 kilometers ahead, the killer creepers started appearing, Feng Chengji announced. Rest up now, gather your strength, you'll need it. The group disembarked, collapsing onto the ground to recuperate. The journey had been grueling, the wind relentless, leaving their faces caked in grit and their mouths dry with the taste of sand. Only Fan Qingde, who had wrapped her face in a strip of tattered cloth, remained relatively unscathed. She uncapped her water pouch and took a long, satisfying gulp. Just as she was about to sit and join the others, a sound prickled at the edge of her awareness, a faint, insidious rustling, like the whisper of scales against sand. Her heart ceased. Something was out there. Fan Qingde felt a sudden, electric jolt race across her scalp, a primal warning that bypassed thought entirely. Her body moved instinctively, flinging itself forward in a desperate roll just as flesh. A vine, thick as a grown man's thigh, erupted from the spot where she had been sitting mere moments before, slicing the air with a deadly precision. Healer vine, get back, everyone fall back. Zhang Chengji's voice was a sharp bark, his face contorted with alarm as he motioned for the team to retreat. But the vines were everywhere, bursting from the ground like the limbs of some ancient, wrathful beast. They clawed at the air, writhing and twisting, boxing the group into a tightening ring of menace. Damn it, how did it end up here? Quick torches, light the torches. Zhang's voice cracked under the strain, his orders barely audible over the chaos. Panic overtook the group. Some scrambled to dodge the lashing vines, their movements frantic and uncoordinated. Others fumbled with their packs, hands trembling as they searched for torches. The attack had come too suddenly, too violently, leaving them all reeling. Despair began to creep into Fan Qingde's heart, but then she noticed something strange. The killer vine, with all its snapping, slithering ferocity, didn't seem particularly interested in the group as a whole. Its movements were deliberate, focused, as if drawn by some unseen force. It was coming for her. Damn it all, she cursed under her breath, her voice a mix of fear and fury. These finest serpentine things with scales so fine they shimmered like wet stone under the dim light seemed hell-bent on pursuing her alone. She threw herself into another desperate roll, narrowly avoiding a vine that lashed out with the speed of a striking cobra. Zhang, torches, now, she shouted, her voice raw with urgency. Zhang Chengji, momentarily frozen by the sight of dozens of vines converging on a single target, snapped back to reality at the sound of her plea. No, get those torches lit. Support her. The team scrambled to obey, flames flickering to life as torches were hastily ignited. They surged toward Fan Qingde, their fear palpable, but their resolve firm. Another roll, another near miss. This time, her water pouch slipped from her belt, tumbling to the ground. The effect was immediate. The vines, which had been singularly focused on her, suddenly diverted, coiling and writhing toward the fallen pouch. In an instant, it was shredded. The pouch tore open, spilling its contents, a few precious drops of crystalline water into the parched earth. The vines went wild, tangling and wrestling with one another in a frenzy, each one desperate to claim even the smallest sip. Fan Qingde's mind raced, the pieces falling into place. It was the spatial water. That was what had driven the killer vine into this maddened state. She did waste a second. While the vines were distracted, she bolted, her feet pounding against the earth as she put as much distance as possible between herself and the chaos. But her reprieve would be short-lived. Once the water was gone, they'd come for her again. She needed a torch, needed fire to fight back. Her eyes scanned the scene, searching for Zhang Chengji and the others. When she spotted them, her heart sank. They were locked in a standoff with another group, Zhao Kun's team. Zhao Kun. Of course. The two teams had left the base on overlapping missions, their paths inevitably crossing in this desolate wasteland. But Zhao Kun's group had arrived just in time to witness Fan Qingde's peril, and instead of helping, they had seized the opportunity to settle old scores. They had deliberately blocked Zhang Chengji's team, cutting off her reinforcements. They wanted her dead. Fan Qingde's lips curled into a cold, bitter smile. Hell has no gate, yet you've come knocking, she muttered under her breath. She turned and sprinted toward the clashing groups, her movements deliberate, her mind sharp with purpose. As she ran, she let a few drops of spatial water seep from her fingertips, the liquid glinting like molten silver in the dim light. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The scent of the water hit the air, and the killer vines, which had been tangled in their own frenzy, snapped to attention. They surged toward her, their movements unified and terrifying in their speed. From the distance, more vines erupted from the sand, slithering toward her like predators drawn to blood. In moments, a landscape transformed. Fang Qingde stood at the epicenter of a writhing, seething mess of vines, their numbers swelling into the thousands. They wove together, their knotted forms creating a vast, undulating net that seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. The two groups, locked in their petty feud, froze as they registered the enormity of what was happening. Faces drained of color. Head west, used the torches to clear a path. Fang Qingde shouted as she barreled into the fray, her voice cutting through the rising tide of panic. Zhang Qingji hesitated for only a fraction of a second before nodding. There was no time for doubt, no room for second-guessing. He had no choice but to trust her. Retreat. Zhang Qingji raised the torch high, his voice sharp against the oppressive silence, and led his team westward. But as he cast a glance over his shoulder, his heart sank. Fang Qingde was moving in the opposite direction, striding eastward with an unsettling determination, the writhing, clawing vines at her heels like a pack of feral beasts obeying her silent command. The vines, as if bewitched, pursued her eastward, leaving Zhang Qingji and his torch-bearing crew an unimpeded path to escape the encroaching, suffocating snare of vegetation. Not everyone was so fortunate. Zhao Kun and his group arrived just in time to collide with Zhang Qingji's retreating team, chaos erupting before they could even ignite their torches. The air was thick with shouts and the scrape of steel, but Fang Qingde, with a calculated malice, lured the vines into a relentless orbit around Zhao Kun's group. The monstrous plants coiled tighter and tighter, forcing the men into a panicked frenzy. Some cowered, hands clasped over their heads, while others swung their blades wildly, their movements desperate and without aim. Escape was no longer an option. Stay back, don't come any closer. Zhao Kun's voice cracked as he stumbled backward, his legs trembling beneath him. His wide, terror-stricken eyes locked onto Fang Qingde, who was hurtling toward him with a ferocity that bordered on madness. He couldn't comprehend how this woman had summoned such a legion of deadly vines, how she seemed utterly unafraid of the monstrous web that had already formed, its tendrils thick and menacing, ready to ensnare anything within reach. Was she planning to die with him? Woodruff clawed at Zhao Kun's chest. If he'd known this woman was a lunatic, he would never have provoked her, not even in his most reckless moments. But Fang Qingde paid no heed to his frantic cries. Her resolve was unshakable, her steps unyielding as she charged forward. The vines closed in from all directions, weaving a dense, inescapable net. The air grew heavy, the space suffocatingly tight. And then, in a single, fluid motion, Fang Qingde retrieved a vial of spatial water from her hidden reserve and flung its contents toward Zhao Kun and his men. The water splashed across Zhao Kun's face, cold and shocking. He barely had time to register the sensation before the vines descended upon him, with a feral hunger. Pain didn't even have a chance to register. In an instant, he was torn apart, reduced to nothing but fragments. His companions fared no better. The vines coiled around them, crushing and ripping with merciless precision. But Fang Qingde, her timing impeccable, vanished into the safety of her spatial sanctuary the moment the water left her hand. Inside, she collapsed onto the soft grass, her chest heaving as she gulped down air. Her lungs burned, her head throbbed, and for a moment, she thought her body might betray her entirely. The exertion had pushed her fragile frame far beyond its limits. Still, a grim satisfaction settled over her. It had been a gamble, but she had rid herself of a few significant threats. Yet as her thoughts drifted to the grisly fate of Zhao Kun and his men, a faint, uncomfortable weight pressed against her chest. She had grown up under the crimson flag, in a world where bloodshed was distant, theoretical. Now, with her hands stained in such visceral violence, the psychological toll was undeniable. It was only thanks to King Lewin's decisive blade during their first confrontation with Zhao Kun that Fan Qingde had steeled herself for this moment. Afterward, she had pored over the memories left by this body's original owner, again and again, until the brutal laws of survival in this wasteland were seared into her mind. No mercy. No loose ends. If even King Lewin, just a child, could understand this, how could she allow herself to falter? And so, when the opportunity arose, she had acted with ruthless precision, drawing the vines to ensure Zhao Kun and his men were obliterated. She couldn't afford to linger. Her consciousness extended outward, probing the scene beyond her sanctuary's borders. The vines were still there, a grotesque, pulsating web, feasting on the remnants of Zhao Kun and his companions. Fan Qingde's sharp eyes caught sight of their discarded belongings, cast aside by the vines as if they were of no interest. Tentatively, she reached out with her mind, testing whether she could retrieve the items. To her relief, it worked. Machetes 3, cleavers 2, 2 sand buggies, and firearms. As she inventoried the spoils, her face darkened. Among the haul were 3 pistols and a submachine gun. The realization sent a shiver down her spine. It was sheer luck that the oppressive presence of the vine web had thrown Zhao Kun's group into disarray, leaving them no time to use these weapons against her. The vines might be impervious to bullets, but her flesh and blood certainly weren't. Securing the loot, Fan Qingde made a silent vow. She would acquire a full set of bulletproof gear as soon as she returned. By now, the vines had finished their gruesome feast, and the scent of the spatial water had begun to dissipate. Slowly, the monstrous web unraveled, its tendrils retreating. Fan Qingde rummaged through the pile of Zhao Kun's discarded belongings, extracting a torch and a box of matches. Striking a flame, she held the torch aloft and stepped out of her sanctuary, her eyes scanning the now cleared path ahead. With the torchlight casting a protective glow, the murderous vines, though restless and eager, recoiled from the fiery brilliance, lurking at a cautious distance, their sinister intent held at bay. Fan Qingde allowed herself a moment of reprieve. These killer vines, though ferocious, bore weaknesses as glaring as their savagery. No wonder collecting them was only classified as a T-level mission. Just as she turned westward, intending to regroup with Saint Lotta and the others, a glint of silver caught her sharp eye. She unearthed the object from the Santa wristband. Her gaze fell upon its screen just in time to see the words, "Photo successfully transmitted to emergency contact." Her expression froze, and before she could stop herself, a curse slipped from her lips, venomous and raw. Identity wristbands could be programmed with emergency contacts. In moments of peril, pressing the emergency button would trigger the device to capture an image of the wearer's situation and transmit it to the designated recipient. The memory wasn't hers, it belonged to someone else. She had pored over it countless times, memorizing the critical survival rules of this wasteland. Yet somehow, this small but crucial detail had eluded her. A flicker of panic rose in her chest, but she quelled it swiftly, her mind regaining its sharp edge. After all, a hastily snapped photo might not even be clear. And even if it captured her face in perfect clarity, so what? Her feud with Zhao Kun and his faction was no secret. The animosity between their groups was long-standing, a simmering conflict that needed no further provocation. If someone went missing during this mission, it would merely be chopped up as another skirmish between rival factions. While the skyfall there were taller figures to bear its weight. With Jing Chengji as the more prominent target, Fan Qingde had little reason to fret. A photo was just that, a still image, devoid of movement or context. She wasn't concerned about exposing the secrets of her spatial ability. A blurry silhouette could easily be dismissed, explained away. Having reasoned through the situation, Fan Qingde's tension eased once more. She resumed her westward path, muttering under her breath, "Too bad these identity wristbands are biologically bound. Even if I wanted to cash in on the dead, I'd need their fingerprints or retinal scans." Still, the thought of the spoils she had already secured in her personal space brought a slight smile to her lips. Weapons fetched a high price. And then there were the two Wastelands and vehicles priceless assets for traversing this desolate terrain. For the next 10 minutes, she pressed on toward the west, her steps steady and deliberate. Finally, she spotted Zhang Chengji and the others. The group was in disarray. Someone was injured, their anguished cries cutting through the still air like jagged shards of glass. "Qingde, you're alive." Zhang Chengji was the first to notice her return. The towering man's eyes widened in disbelief, his shock writ large across his rugged face. No one could have imagined it. To be surrounded by such a swarm of killer vines, without even a torch in hand, and yet emerge unscathed defied all logic, all reason. "How did you escape the vines?" "That's impossible. There were so many of them, woven together like a net. How could you have possibly gotten out?" Even at his peak, when his abilities were at their strongest, Zhang Chengji doubted he could have achieved such a feat. In this brutal wave of evolution, humanity lagged far behind other species. If not for their intellect, their cunning, they might have already been erased from existence, wiped out like a smudge on a map. Before Feng Qingde could offer an explanation, another voice, hoarse and shrill, cut through the air like a blade. "What kind of demon are you? Can you control the killer vines? They were all after you. It's your fault. If not for you, my husband wouldn't be hurt." The speaker was a tall, broad-boned woman with a rough, almost brutish demeanor. Her frame, solid and imposing, was more akin to that of a man. She was one of the few women in the group, her natural strength earning her a place among the mission's members. Feng Qingde knew her well. Throughout the journey, the woman had shot her looks of disdain, her eyes brimming with contempt, her attitude as sharp as broken glass. In truth, it wasn't just her. Most of the other team members harbored some unspoken grievance against Feng Qingde. They said nothing, of course, out of deference to Zhang Chengji. After all, anyone handpicked by him to join his missions was typically among the most capable in his faction, the elite few. But Feng Qingde. She was a newcomer, freshly arrived from another district, with no discernible background or connections to speak of. She was slight, almost frail-looking, her frame so delicate it seemed the wind might carry her away. And yet, she had brought along a small burdened child, no less. To everyone else, her presence was not merely useless, but a liability, a dead weight dragging them down. That she had managed to secure a spot on a mission so quickly only deepened their discontent. Whispers abounded, rumors swirling like smoke in a closed room. Some speculated she had gazetted up to Zhang Chengji, that her so-called special treatment was the result of something sordid. The woman's name was Wen Feng. Her face twisted into something grotesque, her eyes brimming with venom, as though she would devour Feng Qingde whole if she could. Without a word, she lunged, all fury and reckless abandon. Feng Qingde, however, was not one to swallow insults or endure humiliation in silence. Being cursed at, having fingers jabbed in her face at this was already intolerable. But physical aggression, that was another matter entirely. She sidestepped Wang Feng's charge with a fluid grace, her movements as seamless as water falling over stone. In one swift motion, she pivoted and delivered a fierce kick, her slender legs slicing through the air like a blade. She held back only slightly, using just enough force to send the stocky Wang Feng sprawling. Before Wang Feng could recover, Feng Qingde had already drawn the fruit knife strapped to her side. In an instant, its blade was pressed against Wang Feng's throat, gleaming with a cold, unyielding light. "Do you have a death wish?" Feng Qingde's voice was low, almost a growl, her eyes sharp and unrelenting. There was a ferocity in her gaze, a calculated menace that was 3 parts real and 7 parts feigned. The sheer intensity of her presence seemed to fill the air, suffocating and inescapable. Wen Feng, pale as a ghost, froze beneath her. It all happened so quickly that by the time the blade touched Wang Feng's neck, Zhang Chengji had only just begun to react. His voice rang out, sharp and commanding, cutting through the tension like a whip crack. "Both of you, stop this at once. Fighting among teammates is strictly forbidden. You think the rules are just for show." The rules were, in fact, the backbone of Zhang Qingji's team, the reason they held their position as the undisputed leaders of the Shantytown district. Chief among them was the prohibition against personal disputes during missions. Such conflicts could jeopardize not only the mission's success, but also the safety of the entire team. Fan Qingde remembered Uncle Lu's warnings about these rules. She had forgotten. At this time, she had no choice. Being a newcomer, facing suspicion and rejection was inevitable. That much she understood. And after today's events, after the carnivorous vines had singled her out in their deadly embrace, she knew the others' resentment toward her had only deepened. They had watched her struggle, their eyes heavy with judgment. She had planned to bide her time, to gradually earn their trust. But when someone came at her with fists raised, retreat was not an option. There were two ways to integrate into a team like this: to endure, patiently building rapport and mutual understanding, or to shatter doubts with brute force, proving your worth in a single decisive moment. Fan Qingde had chosen the latter. She had no interest in playing the meek and servile newcomer, nor would she fawn over the veterans for their approval. Her swift, calculated response to Wang Feng's attack had already served its purpose. So when Zhang Qingji barked his command, she released Wang Feng without hesitation, stepping back with an air of casual indifference. "My apologies," she said, her voice light and almost playful. "I assumed the rules didn't apply since Wang Feng didn't seem to care for them. She didn't even give me a chance to explain." She tilted her head to one side, her smile sharp and insincere, her shoulders lifting in a nonchalant shrug. Her words carried the veneer of an apology, but her expression betrayed no trace of remorse. The others saw it now, clear as day. This was no pliable, spineless woman clinging to a man's coattails. No, Fan Qingde was steel wrapped in silk, a thorn disguised as a petal. Zhang Qingji understood her intent. He felt the headache coming on, the weight of having a new troublemaker in his ranks. Yet, at the same time, he couldn't help but admire her audacity, her unyielding spirit. He sighed, his tone measured as he addressed both women. "Wang Feng, you should know better. Injuries are inevitable during missions. Wu Jie was only trying to catch you when you fell. That's why the vine pierced him. Blaming Qingde for that is absurd." Fan Qingde, now aware of the full story, chose not to twist the knife. There was no need to call out Wang Feng's attempt to shift blame. Instead, she reached into the tattered satchel slung over her shoulder, pulling out a battered bottle of Yunnan Beiyao, its label worn smooth and illegible. "I have some medicine here," she said, her tone even, almost kind. "It's great for stopping bleeding. Let's use it for Wu Jie." She extended the bottle, her gesture simple but disarming, a quiet offering of peace amidst the lingering tension. Wang Feng's face froze for a moment when she saw Fan Qingde pull out the medicine. Her lips quivered slightly, as if she were about to spit out another cutting remark, but in the end, she said nothing more. Medicine was a rare commodity, a luxury few could afford. Even the lowest grade level hemostatic powder cost 20 points for a tiny packet. The medicine Fan Qingde produced was unfamiliar to everyone, but as members of the same team, sharing the same precarious existence, no one doubted its authenticity. If she had intended to deceive them, there were far easier ways. She could have wiped them all out earlier, back when the killer vines had them cornered. Zhang Qingji, ever the pragmatic leader, brushed aside Wang Feng's sulking demeanor and took the bottle from Fan Qingde without hesitation. "Thanks, I'll add the cost to the ledger. Once we complete the mission, I'll make sure you're reimbursed." Fan Qingde nodded, saying nothing about the price. Zhang Qingji was fair, he wouldn't shortchange her. Besides, she had offered the medicine to make a profit. Her motives were more calculated than that. Earlier, she had asserted her dominance with an iron will, forcing the team to acknowledge her skills. Yet she knew too well that such sharp brilliance often bred resentment, especially when displayed by an outsider. By offering the medicine now, she softened the edges of her earlier display, bridging the gap between herself and the others, warming their guarded hearts. The team's injuries were not limited to Wu Jie. 3 others bore minor wounds. With the powdered medicine in hand, they treated each other's injuries. Soon, someone exclaimed, their voice tinged with awe. "This stuff is incredible." The bleeding stopped almost instantly. "It's better than any secret I've used before. Could it be great?" Fang Qingde arched an eyebrow, a flicker of pride dancing in her eyes. She couldn't help but marvel at the power of the once classified national formula. To think grade medicines, and certainly anything above them, such as a grade, relied on vast quantities of biological extracts derived from wood element ability users. The process was painstaking. Thousands of plants were needed to produce even a tiny amount of the active compound. The cost was astronomical, but the results spoke for themselves. For Yunnan-Bayo to surpass T grade and potentially rival B grade, the ingenuity of the formula was nothing short of extraordinary. Zhang Chengji's gaze lingered on Fang Qingde, his expression a mix of surprise and contemplation. Everything she brought forth, be it her actions or her possessions, seemed to defy expectations. Her strength, her composure, her resources. How could someone like her have been struggling so desperately before joining their ranks? Noticing his scrutiny, Fang Qingde sighed inwardly. The inevitable had arrived. She met Zhang Chengji's gaze, her eyes unflinching, her voice steady and sincere. "Boss Zhang, I suspect that grade water sources have a powerful attraction for the killer vines." His brows lifted in surprise, but he motioned for her to elaborate. Reaching for the leather water pouch at her waist, Fang Qingde unhooked it with deliberate care. In truth, this was a replacement she had discreetly retrieved from her spatial storage after the original was lost. She had anticipated questions from her teammates and prepared accordingly. "This was my first mission with the team, and I didn't want to be caught unprepared, so I brought everything I could carry. You know, thanks to my parents, I've got access to some grade water sources. This time, since no one's home, I didn't feel safe leaving it behind, so I brought it with me." Her explanation was plausible enough. After all, their shelters were flimsy at best, barely capable of keeping out the elements, let alone determined thieves. While Zhang Chengji's territory was patrolled and guarded, Fang Qingde had only recently moved in from the Chadic outer zones. Her heightened vigilance was understandable, but her words caused a visible ripple among the surrounding team members. Their expressions twisted into something between envy and disbelief. Who carries the grade water on a mission? Was this generosity or sheer ostentation? The difference between C grade and A grade water was like comparing moonshine to a rare vintage of mate, prohibitively expensive, strictly limited, and nearly impossible to obtain. Most of them had never even seen A grade water, let alone tasted it. Their gazes darted toward Fang Qingde's water pouch, tinged with a sore, unspoken jealousy. Fang Qingde ignored their reactions and pressed on. "When I opened the pouch earlier, the killer vines appeared almost immediately. They chased me relentlessly, clearly drawn by the water." The water from her spatial storage was classified as A grade, but Fang Qingde wasn't entirely sure how it compared to the A grade water produced by the base. The distinction, if one existed, remained a mystery. But at this moment, there was no other conclusion to draw. It could only be classified as grade water. After all, before now, no one had dared to indulge in bringing grade water on a mission. Naturally, there was no way to refute the claim that it could attract the deadly vines. As for the future, Fang Qingde pondered. If the grade water sold by the base proved ineffective, she could always claim her batch was sourced through internal channels. After all, no one present, not even Zhang Chengji, had the authority to interact with the core members of the base. Whatever story she spun would be hers to dictate. She recounted in vivid detail how she had dropped another water pouch earlier, causing the vines to immediately abandon their prey and lunge for it instead. Then, she explained how she had seen Kun and the others try to fend off the vines, and how she had seized the opportunity to turn the situation to her advantage, using the water to lure the vines into an ambush. "There's still about 2 or 3 sips of grade water left in this pouch," she proposed, her tone calm, but calculated. "Perhaps we could use it for an experiment." One of the team members shook his head frantically. "No, absolutely not. If the vines are really drawn to greater water the moment we open it, when we just get surrounded again. Fan Qingde seized the moment to explain her earlier escape. Greater water is highly alluring to the vines. They prioritized seizing it above all else. If we light torches in time, we'll be able to break out of their encirclement without issue. In the chaos earlier, no one had noticed that Fan Qingde had been holding a torch. They simply assumed she had grabbed one when she rejoined the group. We gather the vines in one spot, she continued, her voice steady, and then we turn the tables around them with torches and take them down. The moment Fan Qingde finished outlining her plan, Zhang Chengji's eyes gleamed with a sharp, almost predatory light. He had once been an ability user, seasoned from countless missions. His courage, honed by experience, was naturally greater than most. Moreover, as the leader of his faction, with a multitude of subordinates to manage, he was always on the lookout for opportunities to earn extra points to sustain his forces. Fan Qingde's plan sounded dangerous, yes, but she had already proven its feasibility through her actions. After a brief moment of consideration, Zhang Chengji clapped decisively. I think the plan is workable. With their leader's approval, the group had no choice but to act. Still, they debated the specifics of the operation, voices overlapping in a flurry of suggestions and concerns. Monkey's the fastest, and Qingde has the most experience, someone suggested. The two of them should work together ruse the greater water to lure the vines into a cluster, while the rest of us are ready to back them up. Fan Qingde had no objections. She did, after all, have the most experience with the vines. And besides, Fan Chengji's group operated on a merit-based reward system. By providing the water, and then putting herself in harm's way to act as bait, she was bound to earn the most credit for the operation. If the plan succeeded, the team would be able to take down a significant number of the vines. This high-risk, high-reward gamble could secure Fan Qingde a substantial amount of points, enough to establish a more legitimate footing for herself. It would also solidify her and King Liuan's place within Zhang Chengji's faction. Once the plan was finalized, the injured were left behind in the sand crawler to recover, while the rest of the group sprang into action. Fan Qingde and Monkey made their way back to the area where the vines had been most concentrated earlier. The two exchanged a quick glance. Monkey's grip on his torch was tight, his knuckles pale with tension, ready to strike at a moment's notice. Fan Qingde, on the other hand, carefully unsealed the water pouch. The remaining few sips of greater water sloshed faintly, the sound soft, but somehow resonant in the stillness. And then, as if summoned by the mere whisper of the liquid, the familiar rustling began. Swish, swish, swish. Thick, sinewy vines burst forth from the yellow sands, coiling upward like monstrous serpents. They surged toward Fan Qingde and Monkey with a ferocity that made the air itself seem to tremble. Hold on. Fan Qingde ordered sharply, stopping Monkey from lighting the torch just yet. Both of them were taut as bowstrings, every muscle straining with the effort of waiting, of holding their ground. The vines crept closer, their movements sinuous and menacing, until they were no more than 5 meters away. No! Fan Qingde shouted, her voice slicing through the tension like a blade. As the torch flared to life in Monkey's hands, Fan Qingde hurled the water pouch with all her strength. Fan Qingde and Skinny Monkey, clutching torches that flickered like restless spirits, dashed out of the writhing mess of killer vines. When they turned back to glimpse the grotesque spectacly dense, pulsating cluster of tendrils, writhing like a pit of maddened serpents, they couldn't help but draw in sharp, icy breaths. The sight was a waking nightmare, a thing born of fevered imaginings. The moment the two escaped, Zhang Chengji barked an order, his voice sharp and commanding, onto the sand buggies. Prepare the fire resin. 2 sand buggies, now retrofitted with crude contraptions resembling plowshares at the rear, roared to life. As they tore across the dunes, the heavy blades carved deep furrows into the desert floor, leaving behind trenches as jagged and raw as open wounds. The vehicles circled the massive vines with mechanical precision, their paths converging into a single, unbroken ring. No. Sing Changji's voice cut through the night like a blade, and his team sprang into action, dousing the freshly dug trench with copious amounts of fire resina viscous, mutated tree sap, volatile and eager to burn. The air grew thick with its pungent, resinous odor, clinging to the skin like an invisible film. Once the resin was in place, Feng Changji struck a match and flicked it into the trench. The fire ignited with a ferocity that seemed almost alive, roaring to life and racing along the channel in a brilliant, searing arc. The flames formed a perfect wall, trapping the killer vines within their fiery embrace. Sensing the encroaching heat, the vines recoiled instinctively, their tendrils twitching and flailing in a grotesque dance of panic. They surged forward, only to halt abruptly at the edge of the fire, their primal fear of the flames overriding their hunger. Even attempts to burrow into the sand were thwarted by the relentless waves of heat that radiated from the inferno, driving them back with merciless intensity. Now, cut them down, every last one. Sane Changji's blade gleamed in the firelight as he charged forward, his voice a rallying cry. Seizing the moment, the team descended upon the trapped vines, their movements fluid and practiced. They struck with precision, keeping close to the fire's edge, retreating when the vines lashed out, then surging forward to deliver decisive blows. It was a brutal, methodical dance, and with every severed tendril, the killer vines lost their vitality, collapsing into lifeless heaps. Amid the chaos, Skinny Monkey sprinted tirelessly along the fire's perimeter, feeding more resin into the trench to ensure the flames didn't falter. His breath came in ragged gasps, each inhalation a struggle, until at last, when the final vine was felled, he collapsed onto the sand, panting like a bellows on its last legs. The team was exhausted, their bodies battered and bruised. Singed by stray tongues of flame, lashed by the vine's dying throes, they were a disheveled, grimy lot. Yet their faces shone with exhilaration. "That was the easiest fight we've ever had," one of them exclaimed, his voice hoarse but jubilant. "Think we've hauled in over 10,000 pounds this time," another ventured, his eyes gleaming with the promise of riches. "We're rich, brothers." Sane Changji, equally elated, directed the team to begin clearing the battlefield. His voice rang out, firm and generous. "This all wouldn't have been possible without Qingde intel, and let's not forget the bait she provided. She deserves the highest credit this time." Most of the team nodded in agreement, their respect evident. A few, however, bristled silently, their discontent flickering like embers beneath the surface. But Feng Changji's authority was ironclad, and none dared voice their dissent aloud. Feng Qingde caught the subtle tension, a faint smile curling her lips. Let them grumble, she thought. In both the modern world and this desolate wasteland, strength was the only currency that mattered. You earned what you could carry, and you carried what you could earn. Expecting more was a fool's errand. The battlefield was soon cleared, the severed vines bundled into a massive, unwieldy heap that loomed like a grotesque monument to their victory. Its sheer weight seemed to press against the air, a silent testament to their efforts. Sang Changji frowned as he surveyed the spoils. 2 Sen buddies won't be enough to haul this back. Lin Xiaokan's group have 2 vehicles. Let's find them. If we can recover their gear, we'll have 2 more buddies for the team, one of the men suggested eagerly, his enthusiasm infectious. Feng Qingde's smile faltered for the briefest of moments, a flicker of unease crossing her face before she regained her composure. She said nothing, watching as the others scrambled back to the previous battlefield, their excitement palpable. But their search yielded nothing. Not a single scrap of equipment remained. That's strange. Could the killer vines have devoured even the vehicles? One of them muttered, his voice tinged with disbelief. Sang Changji turned to Feng Qingde, his brow furrowed. "Qingde, you were there. Did you see anything?" There was no accusation in his tone, only a quiet curiosity, but the question hung in the air like a shadow. After all, there was simply too much, especially the 2 sand vehicles, which were far too conspicuous. It was impossible for Feng Qingde to have whisked everything away and hidden it in such a short time. No one could have guessed that Feng Qingde possessed a private space of her own, a secret so implausible that no one would even think to suspect her of involvement in the mysterious disappearance of the supplies. Feigning a thoughtful expression, she paused for a moment before replying. It was utter chaos back then. I was scared out of my wits. He didn't notice what happened to those things. The first time anyone had witnessed the murderous vines weaving themselves into a net, Jane Changji had been just as shaken. Otherwise, he might not have so readily accepted Fan Qingday's explanation. Strange, isn't it? All that stuff, could the sand have swallowed it up? Fan Qingday nodded earnestly, her face a mask of sincerity. It's not entirely impossible. Sensing the others' gazes drifting toward her, she adopted an air of solemnity, her voice calm but convincing. Think about it. There were so many of those murderous vines gathered in one place, writhing up from beneath the sand. Afterward, they all retreated underground, with so many vines churning the soil. It's entirely plausible that everything got buried in the process. She even offered an example, her tone almost professorial. Take the trench we just dug earlier. By the time the fight was over, it had mostly collapsed, hadn't it? This is sand we're talking about. Its fluidity makes that kind of thing perfectly normal. The group exchanged glances, their minds replaying the scene of the battlefield. They recalled how the trench, once waist deep, had sunk to barely a foot by the end of the skirmish. The logic of her words began to take root in their thoughts, and one by one, they nodded in agreement. Ah, what a waste if it's all buried under the sand. Shouldn't we dig around here a little, just in case? The two sand vehicles alone were an unimaginable treasure for the people of the shanty town. Fan Qingday, reluctant to let go of the vehicles, gave his assent, allowing the team to come through the area in search of the missing supplies. Fan Qingday, for her part, voiced no objections. But the truth was, after 2 grueling battles of wits and survival against the murderous vines, and now hours spent digging and sifting through the sand, her strength was nearly depleted. She felt as though her body had been wrung dry, every fiber of her being aching with exhaustion. She needed to find a way to redirect their obsession with Zhao Kun's equipment, to shift their focus elsewhere. Her mind churned, her thoughts racing, until suddenly, a spark of inspiration lit her weary eyes. "Boss Sang," she called out, her voice tinged with a calculated curiosity. "I was wondering, those severe murderous vines, the parts still buried underground, shouldn't we dig those up too?" Her suggestion hung in the air, tantalizing. "We've already gathered so much from the surface. If we dig up the roots, couldn't we double our haul?" Fan Qingday hesitated, his expression momentarily blank. "No one's ever thought to dig up the roots before. We've always just taken the parts above the sand and left the rest. Why not give it a try?" Fan Qingday pressed, her tone light but persuasive. "We've been digging here for ages and found nothing. Why not shift over there instead? If it works out, the rewards could be enormous, maybe even enough to trade for a heap of points." The words planted a seed of possibility in Fan Qingday's mind. The 2 sand vehicles were massive, and after so much fruitless searching, hope of finding them was dwindling fast. But if Fan Qingday's proposal bore fruit, the team's haul could indeed double. Finally swayed, Fan Qingday divided the group, sending half the members with Fan Qingday to test her theory. And Fan Qingday's instincts proved correct. The moment they began digging, their efforts were rewarded. It wasn't long before they unearthed a segment of a murderous vine. At first, they assumed it was merely a thick root, with countless tendrils branching off it. But as they continued to excavate, they uncovered the truth. Each murderous vine was a self-contained unit, a singular entity. Its roots were sparse, a few thin, spindly strands clinging feebly to its tail end. No one of these vines could slither across the sands, seeking water like serpents. They lacked mouths, eyes, or internal organs, but their evolution had brought them perilously close to the cunning of living snakes. As the team's efforts yielded results, those still searching for Zhao Kun's equipment began to grow restless. Another hour passed. The sand in that area had been turned over and sifted through to the point of exhaustion, yet not a single trace of the equipment surfaced. Gradually, even Fan Qingday began to lose hope. Forget it, he muttered at last, his voice tinged with resignation. Let's all go back and focus on digging up the murderous vines. If we can clear out the remaining ones, we'll still come out of this with a hefty profit. The team quickly redirected their efforts, joining Feng Qingde and her group. As the evening deepened into dusk, they finally unearthed the last of the murderous vines. The haul was staggering. By the time they were done, the vines piled before them weighed at least 20 to 30,000 pounds of fortune beyond their wildest dreams. On the return to the base, tensions flared once more, a clash of wolves splitting the group into two opposing camps. One faction armed for retracing their original path, a route shorter and swifter, the kind that promised a quick return to the safety of the base. Dragging behind them such an ostentatious haul of killer vines was like parading a beacon of temptation through the wilderness. The sooner they reached the base, the sooner they could exhale. The others, however, insisted on taking a detour. They urged for a path more desolate, one where human footprints were scarce and curious eyes scarcer still. Safety, they contended, lay in discretion, in treading a needle-thin route through the uninhabited expanse to ensure that the vines reached their destination unmolested. Voices rose, arguments tangled upon themselves like the very vines they carried. At the center of it all, Feng Qingde stood, his brow furrowed in deliberation, his silence a weight upon the group. And then, as if struck by a sudden clarity, he lifted his gaze and fixed it on Feng Qingde. Qingde, what do you think? Their acquaintance was brief, mere days, yet in that short span of time, Feng Qingde had demonstrated a competence that had not gone unnoticed. Feng Qingde, ever the pragmatist, valued results, and it was this respect that prompted his question. Feng Qingde did not hesitate, her mind already waving through the possibilities. I agree, a detour is the better choice, she said, her tone measured yet firm. The old route is too crowded, too many people, too many prying eyes. It is only a matter of time before someone sees all this. She gestured to the massive hall of vines and decides to cause trouble. Her voice dropped slightly, but the weight of her words only grew. We're hauling enough killer vines to fill 2 sand buggies. The weight alone slows us down. If someone ambushes us, we won't have the speed to escape. The plan to transport the vines had been hers. She had orchestrated the weaving of the vines into colossal baskets, their sinewy lengths repurposed into thick ropes that now tethered the cargo to the sand buggies. A master stroke of resourcefulness, wringing every ounce of utility from the environment. The buggies, with their powerful engines, could manage the load, but speed was a luxury they could not afford. Feng Qingde had already been leaning toward the detour, but Feng Qingde's reasoning sealed his decision. When it settled, he declared, his voice cutting through the lingering murmurs of dissent. We take the detour. The group deliberated briefly before settling on a route so remote it bordered on the surreal, a stretch of land untouched by human presence. As it happened, Feng Qingde knew the area well. The original owner of her body, her predecessor, as she thought of them at once, scoured that very region for supplies. A ghost town of sorts, its skeletal remains were a testament to a bygone era. The ruins of buildings from over a century ago still lingered, their concrete husks standing defiant against time and decay. But the area was steeped in radiation, a lethal veil that demanded state-of-the-art isolation gear just to step foot within its borders. Civilians were forbidden from venturing near, and even the officials had deemed it a barren wasteland after multiple sweeps for salvageable materials. No one went there. No one, that is, except for the original Feng Qingde. As the sand buggies rumbled toward their destination, the horizon began to shift. Against the backdrop of an endless expanse of sand and sky, the jagged silhouettes of abandoned skyscrapers emerged, their broken spires clawing at the heavens like the bones of some ancient, forgotten beast. Feng Qingde's chest tightened, a strange hate blooming within her. Nostalgia, bitter and unbidden, washed over her. The ruins were a relic of the world she had once known, a world of neon lights and bustling streets, of laughter and life. Now, they stood as hollow monuments to a time lost, their shattered windows and crumbling facades whispering of a vibrancy long extinguished. The more she gazed upon them, the more her heart stirred with a dangerous longing. The official sweeps had deemed the area barren, but Feng Qingde was not so easily convinced. To her, the ruins were a treasure trove waiting to be unearthed. What the officials had dismissed as useless or broken, she could restore with her unique ability to rewind time's effects on objects. The thought sent a thrill through her, a spark of determination igniting within her chest. The radiation, however, posed a formidable challenge. But then her mind turned to her spatial ability, the mysterious sanctuary she carried within her. If it could shield her from the radiation or even purify it, then she could navigate the ruins safely, her consciousness guiding her exploration while her body remained protected. The idea was tantalizing, almost reckless in its allure. She would need to plan, to strategize, but the thought of what she might uncover was enough to set her resolve. For now, though, she pushed the thought aside, her focus returning to the present. The base was their immediate goal. When they finally arrived, the moon hung high in the sky, casting its pale light over the ramshackle sprawl of the settlement. It was the dead of night, yet their arrival did not go unnoticed. The sight of their massive hull basket upon basket of killer-vinescent ripples through the camp. Figures emerged from their makeshift shelters, their eyes gleaming with a mix of awe and avarice. The air grew tense, the weight of too many stares pressing down on them. Seng Changji, ever vigilant, leaned close to Skinny Monkey, his voice a low murmur. Go back and get reinforcements. Skinny Monkey nodded, his weary frame slipping into the crowd with practiced ease, waving through the throng like a shadow. The rest of the group tightened their grip on their weapons, their gazes scanning the crowd with wary precision. The night was far from over, and danger hung in the air like the sharp taint of iron. Feng Qingde sighed, weariness settling deep into her bones like a winter chill that refused to thaw. Life in the shanty town was a relentless grind, the kind that stripped people bare, leaving them raw and desperate. It made them easy prey for the allure of profit, however fleeting or ill-gotten. And now, like a carcass thrown into a den of wolves, this tantalizing prize dangled before them fat, glistening, impossible to ignore. Who wouldn't want a piece of it? The crowd, a motley throng of blond faces and sharp eyes, watched with a predatory intensity, their collective hunger palpable. As Seng Changji's team inched closer to the gates of the base city, the air grew taut with anticipation, the kind that prickled under the skin. Just was a whisper away. If the team made it inside, under the watchful eyes of the base personnel, the mob would lose its chance, its courage. But out here, in the lawless expanse, everything was up for grabs. The tension had quelled so tightly it felt like the world might snap in two. And then, cutting through the oppressive silence like a blade, came a voice bright, sweet, and startlingly out of place. Sister, and Lu brought me here to pick you up. King Luan's childlike voice rang out, a melody in the dark. Feng Qingde's heart skipped. She turned, her eyes catching the sight of Aunt Lu holding little King Luan in her arms. But it wasn't just them. Behind them stood 100 or more of Seng Changji's people, their presence unmistakable. It was the armbands that gave them away, black cloth tied around their sleeves. One or two might have gone unnoticed, but in mass, the sight was striking, almost ominous. Relief washed over Feng Qingde like a sudden gust of cool air. She cast a sidelong glance at Seng Changji, her curiosity piqued. The identity wristbands they all wore were rudimentary things, far less sophisticated than the sleek devices of the old world. They supported only the most basic functions: identity verification, small transactions, and the transmission of brief messages or images. And even those were limited by the spotty network infrastructure. Venture too far from the base, and the signal would falter, rendering communication unreliable. It was sheer luck, then, that Zhao Kun had managed to send out that emergency contact photo earlier. The signal must have been strong enough at just the right moment. Feng Qingde had assumed Seng Changji's team had similarly sent word ahead. But Seng Changji shook his head, his expression grave. I tried to send a message, but the signal wouldn't go through. It never got out. Feng Qingde frowned. If that was the case, how had his people known to come? A premonition. Some uncanny intuition. Her thoughts were interrupted by piercing gaze, cold and venomous, slicing through the crowd like a dagger. She turned her head and locked eyes with a man whose expression was a storm of fury and malice. It was the kind of look that made her feel as though she were being dissected, piece by piece, by something cruel and unrelenting. "Who is that?" she asked Sang Cheng-ji, her voice low, her unease palpable. Sang, the ever unflappable leader, followed her gaze and frowned slightly. "Zhao Kun's brother, Zhao Bin." Her stomach sank. "When you killed Zhao Kun and his men, were you caught on camera?" The pieces fell into place, with a grim inevitability. Zhao Bin must have gone to Sang Cheng-ji's territory, demanding answers, stirring the pot. The others, fearing an ambush upon their leader's return, had come out in force to meet him. Ironically, Zhao Bin's vendetta had inevitably helped Sang Cheng-ji's team. Understanding dawned on Fang Qingde, followed swiftly by a weary sigh. Of course her face had been caught on camera. This feud was no longer a minor skirmish. It had snowballed into something far larger, far more dangerous. If that was the case, she turned back to Zhao Bin, a radiant smile spreading across her face, and raised her hand in a gesture that was anything but friendly. Zhao Bin's confusion was brief. He didn't understand the meaning of the raised middle finger, but the provocation was clear enough. His face turned a violent shade of crimson, his bloodshot eyes narrowing with rage. Yet he held himself back, his fists trembling at his sides. Sang Cheng-ji's people were nearly all present, weapons in hand, their readiness unmistakable. Zhao Bin's group was outnumbered and outmatched. A direct confrontation would be suicidal, and with the sand vehicles now nearing the base gates, the window for recklessness had closed. Fang Qingde and her companions passed through without incident, the tension dissipating like a storm that had changed its mind. At the checkpoint, the tally was announced. 32,600 pounds of killer vines. 10 pounds for 2 points. Total earnings, 6,520 points. Even Sang Cheng-ji, usually so composed, looked momentarily dazed by the sheer magnitude of the haul. Their faces lit up with triumph, a collective flush of exhilaration. They couldn't get back fast enough. "Hurry, hurry, hurry, let's split the loot," someone shouted, their excitement spilling over. And with that, the group surged forward, eager to claim their share of the spoils, the night swallowing them whole. In Sang Cheng-ji's team, the rules were simple but rigid. 30% of the total points earned from any mission had to be handed over to the team, earmarked for collective development. It was from the shared pool that essential resources like dune buggies and communal weapons were purchased. Only the remainder of the points would be distributed among the team members who participated in the mission. This time, the total earnings amounted to 6,520 points. After deducting the 30% contribution, the team was left with 4,564 points. 16 members had taken part in the mission, but the points couldn't simply be divided evenly. Contributions varied, and so did the rewards. By all accounts, Fang Qingde had earned the lion's share of the credit. The wary monkey, who had put in considerable effort, deserved a larger cut as well. Sang Cheng-ji, as the team leader, made the final call. First, he covered the cost of Fang Qingde medicine and the water she had used as bait. "That medicine of yours, it's not something I've seen on the market. How much is it worth?" Sang Cheng-ji asked, his tone measured. Fang Qingde had already used up a bottle of Yan'anbao, carefully recycling the container, and offering a plausible excuse that the medicine had been procured through private channels, with the bottle needing to be returned. It was a clever ruse, but it left Sang Cheng-ji genuinely curious about its value. Fang Qingde hesitated, momentarily unsure. The efficacy of Yan'anbao was comparable to that of B-grade healing salves. In the wasteland, where injuries were grim inevitability, demand for such medicines was high, though their prices remained relatively moderate compared to other categories of potions. Even so, a single dose of a B-grade salve typically cost 60 points. A bottle of Yan'anbao, with its capacity equivalent to 3 doses, would reasonably be priced at 120 points. Not exorbitant, but far from cheap. After a moment's thought, Feng Qingde said. This particular medicine isn't available for sale. It was a gift from an old acquaintance. As for the price, whatever you think is fair. She genuinely struggled to name a figure. Offering the medicine had been a gesture to foster goodwill with the team. Setting the price might come off as mercenary, even coercive. Feng Qingde pondered briefly before responding. Let's price it as a B-grade healing salve. Its effectiveness justifies it. Feng Qingde nodded subtly, tacitly accepting his valuation. However, when it came to the 2 sips of water she had used as bait, she waved it off. Forget about the water. There's so little left it's not worth calculating the price. A-grade water was valued at 20 points per liter, but the minuscule amount she had used would only amount to 1 or 2 points. Hardly worth quibbling over. After deducting the medicine's cost, the remaining pool stood at 4,444 points. Feng Qingde decided to allocate 444 points as merit-based rewards. Feng Qingde, having made the greatest contribution, received 100 points. Wang Qi was awarded 80. The rest were distributed among the other members based on their efforts. This left 4,000 points to be split evenly among the 16 participants. Each received 250 points, a tidy sum, though Feng Qingde additional rewards ensured she would be left with a number as awkward as it was unflattering. 250 points. It was enough to make the non-participating members green with envy. Even among the ranks of those with supernatural abilities, earning 100 or 200 points in a month was a rare feat. For most, 250 points was an extraordinary windfall. This mission had allowed 16 individuals to earn in a single outing what others might toil for an entire month to achieve. While the rest of the team basked in their good fortune, Uncle Lu spoke up, attributing their success entirely to Feng Qingde. If it weren't for her, none of us would have made this kind of haul. His words left the others astonished, their curiosity piqued. They pressed him for details, eager to hear the story. Feng Qingde, knowing Uncle Lu was trying to help her integrate into the group, didn't stop him. But she couldn't bear to linger and listen to his exaggerated praise either. Taking the child King Luan from Atlas' hands, Feng Qingde quietly slipped away, leaving the chatter behind. By the time Feng Qingde stumbled back home, the first pale streaks of dawn were already smudging the horizon. Exhaustion clung to her like a heavy cloak, and she barely managed to drag herself and King Luan to bed before collapsing into a fitful sleep. But sleep was fickle. No sooner had her head hit the pillow than a sharp realization jolted her awake. The parasol tree in her dimensional spaces she had forgotten to replenish its energy. The day's mission had consumed her entirely, leaving no room for such vital routines. Worse yet, she hadn't even thought to use the restored energy to repair any of her precious items. The thrill of earning over 300 points evaporated in an instant, replaced by a gnawing sense of loss. To Feng Qingde, leaving her abilities untapped was akin to throwing gold into the sea. She shot upright in one fluid motion, as sudden and precise as a fish breaking the water's surface. Casting a quick glance at King Luan, who was already deep in slumber, she tiptoed into her space, her movements deliberate, her mind abuzz with urgency. Placing her hand against the smooth bark of the parasol tree, she began channeling energy into it. Gradually, she felt her internal reserves deplete as the energy bar within her body dipped lower. Yet just as she calculated that the tree should be nearing its saturation point, something unexpected happened. The tree's absorption intensified, becoming almost voracious. For a fleeting moment, she thought she sensed an emotion, indignant reproach, faint, but unmistakable, as though the tree itself were sulking over her neglect. The absurdity of the notion made her pause, but guilt surged in her chest nonetheless. Without hesitation, she increased the flow of energy. The tree drank greedily, its hunger insatiable, but the feedback was just as generous. In mere moments, Feng Qingde felt her energy reserves swell, doubling in capacity. When the parasol tree abruptly ceased its absorption, she found herself oddly reluctant, as if she had quite finished a riveting conversation. Good tree, she murmured, patting the bark with an apologetic smile that bordered on sheepish. "I'm really sorry about yesterday. I promise it won't happen again." Her voice, though soft, carried a peculiar blend of sincerity and self-mockery. With her energy bar now brimming, Feng Qingde resolved to expend it all before returning to bed. After all, the bar could only hold so much. Any unused energy would simply go to waste. Settling herself cross-legged on the grassy expanse of her space, she pulled out a stack of plastic scraps and began sifting through them, selecting items to restore. The doubled energy reserves proved fruitful. By the time she was done, she had successfully repaired 13 items. Among them were 9 packets of snacks, chips, dried meat, and the Lykia bright red plastic barrel, a large blue and red striped tarp roughly the size of a bedspread, a single vial of Huixing Zangkai water, and, somewhat awkwardly, a box of condoms. The haul was gratifying, to say the least. The snacks alone would sustain her and King Luan for days, perhaps even weeks, with plenty to spare. And the Huixing Zangkai water, no, that was a treasure. She had spotted a small, familiar-looking blue cap amidst the plastic scraps and, driven by instinct, had taken a gamble to restore it. Thankfully, it had required only a negligible amount of energy. Huixing Zangkai water, with its properties to dispel heat and dampness, regulate Qi, and harmonize the body, was invaluable in their arid, sweltering environment. The Chuanma base, situated amidst endless stretches of yellow sand, was plagued by oppressive heat and dryness. Heat stroke was a constant threat, and as summer loomed, bringing with it the year's most blistering temperatures, the mortality rate from heat-related illnesses would only climb. In such dire conditions, this tiny vial could mean the difference between life and death. Feng Qingde made a mental note. From now on, a portion of her daily energy would be allocated to restoring Huixing Zangkai water and Yananbei. Medicines, she reminded herself, were the most irreplaceable of resources, especially in the treacherous, desolate expanse of the wasteland. Their importance could not be overstated. Content with her accomplishments, she carefully stowed away the restored items. Her gaze swept over the now cluttered grassland, and she frowned slightly. She would need shelves, and soon. A growing collection of supplies couldn't simply be left in disarray. Yet the thought of shelves standing awkwardly in the middle of the space did sit well with her. If only she could have a small house here, a proper place to store everything. Her mind wandered as she climbed out of the dimensional space, her thoughts trailing behind her like a wisp of smoke. She didn't notice the tiny, bead-like particles clinging to the tattered fabric of her clothes. Nor did she see them fall silently onto the verdant grass, their shapes disturbingly reminiscent of insect eggs, as they nestled into the soil with an almost imperceptible intent. The day had fully broken by the time Feng Qingde finally succumbed to sleep, her exhaustion pulling her into a deep slumber that lasted well into the late afternoon. King Luan, however, had woken hours earlier. Yet, she made no fuss, sitting quietly at the edge of the bed, her small fingers fiddling with one another in a game born of boredom and patience. When Feng Qingde opened her eyes and saw the little girl waiting so obediently, her heart softened, as if melting into warm honey. "How long have you been awake, King Luan? Have you eaten anything?" At the sound of her sister's voice, King Luan's head snapped toward her, her bright eyes locking onto Feng Qingde's with the kind of radiant, unreserved joy only children seem capable of. Her smile bloomed, white and brilliant, like sunlight spilling through a crack in a stormy sky. "You're awake, sister. I don't know how long I've been up, but I did eat. I drank half of the nutrient solution you left for me yesterday." As she spoke, her small hands rummaged through her belongings, producing the half-empty container of nutrient solution and offering it up like a treasure. "Here, the rest is for you to keep." Feng Qingde took the container, her fingers brushing against its smooth surface, a faint trace of surprise flickering across her face. "You didn't drink it yesterday." "Yesterday, Aunt Ayla wouldn't let me. She insisted I drink the one from her house instead." Understanding dawned, and with it came a sigh that escaped her lips almost involuntarily. The family they had shown her, and King Luan so much kindness, their generosity weaving a net of gratitude that seemed to grow heavier with each passing day. After a day of rest, energy coursed through Feng Qingde once more, her body no longer weighed down by the fatigue that had clung to her like a shroud. She had half a mind to delve into her hidden trove again, to try her luck at unearthing something of value, something that could be offered as a token of thanks to Uncle and Aunt Lu. But before she could act on the thought, a knock came at the door of their ramshackle shelter, the sound sharp and urgent against the stillness. "King Luan, are you there?" It was Uncle Lu's voice, strained and edged with urgency. Feng Qingde rose immediately, her feet finding the floor with purpose. "We're here." She opened the door to find a crowd gathered outside, their faces familiar yet taut with tension. These were members of Zhang Chengji's team, individuals she had come to recognize over the past few days. Their expressions, a mix of anger and unease, sent a ripple of uneasiness through her chest. "What happened?" she asked, her voice steady but low, her instincts already bracing for the worst. "The team that went out on a mission today was ambushed by Xiaobin and his men," Uncle Lu explained, his tone clipped. "It happened not far from the base. One of our members managed to send a message for reinforcements." Feng Qingde's expression darkened, her lips pressing into a thin line as she turned on her heel and strode back inside. She didn't need to be told twice. This wasn't just about the team, she knew, deep down, that this attack was retaliation, a direct consequence of her actions the day before. Grabbing the fruit knife she had kept close at hand, she knelt to King Luan's level, her voice firm yet gentle. "Go to Aunt Lu's house, stay with her, and don't leave her side." King Luan hesitated, her small face clouded with worry, but she nodded obediently, and darted toward the neighboring shelter. It was barely 10 meters away, close enough for Feng Qingde to see Aunt Lu already heading toward them, her steps quick and purposeful. The two met halfway, and Aunt Lu gave Feng Qingde a reassuring gesture, her hand raised in a silent promise to keep King Luan safe. Only then did Feng Qingde turn back to Uncle Lu. "Let's go." "Don't overthink it, Qingde," Uncle Lu said as they walked. "Our feud with Yao Bin's group has been simmering for a long time. This kind of thing happens often. Even if yesterday had happened, they'd still be looking for trouble with our team." She gave a small, hollow tut of her lips, a gesture that barely passed for a smile. His words, though well-meaning, did little to lift the weight pressing against her chest. Regret was absent from her mind. She did regret dealing with Xiao Kan and his gang. They were like a pack of mangy dogs, snapping and snarling at anything in their path, their grudges as persistent as the stench of decay in a forgotten alley. If left unchecked, they would only grow bolder, their shadows lengthening over her and King Luan's fragile sense of safety. Better to end it now, she thought, her resolve hardening. If the conflict was destined to escalate, then let it escalate to the point of no return. She had never been one to cower from a fight. When they reached Zhang Chengji, his instructions were as curt as they were chilling. "No mercy, every one of them you take down weakens their side." The team that gathered was a force of over 50, each member armed with weapons that gleamed with lethal intent. Even Feng Qingde was handed a watermelon knife, its blade crude, but undeniably sharp. As she observed the group, their faces set with grim determination, a strange quiet settled over her. The fiery anger that had burned in her chest earlier cooled into something colder, more calculating. Hand-to-hand combat, she thought grimly. That chaotic melee where the line between friend and foe could blur in an instant. The thought sent a shiver down her spine, a premonition of the bloodshed to come. The risk was too great. Feng Qingde's chest tightened, her breath hitching in her throat. A dreadful premonition coiled in her gut, and sure enough, the moment both sides crossed paths, there were no words exchanged, no warnings heeded. Blades were drawn, and chaos erupted like a storm tearing through a brittle forest. Feng Qingde kept to the outskirts, a shadow in the fray, striking only when opportunity begged her hand. But she had barely felt two men before she felt it a prickle at the back of her neck, the unmistakable weight of a predator's gaze locking onto her. "Kill her first, I swear on my life, I'll avenge Kang Kun today." Xiao Bin's voice rang out, raw with fury, as he charged forward with a dozen men at his back, their footsteps like thunder rolling over dry earth. Oh, for heaven's sake! A shiver of dread coursed through her, her scalp prickling as though 1,000 needles had pierced her skin. There was no way she could face them head-on. Without a second thought, she turned and bolted, her feet pounding against the ground in a frantic rhythm. What kind of joke was this? Even the most skilled fighter could fall to a kitchen knife, let alone to a mob of over 10 armed men. She ran, legs burning, lungs heaving, with the relentless pack hot on her heels. Yet, amidst the panic, a stray thought flitted through her mind, at least in taking some heat off the team. She had no idea how far she had fled, only that every breath felt like fire in her chest. But no matter how fast she ran, no matter how many twists and turns she took, the men behind her clung to her trail like stubborn burrs, unshakable and unyielding. Her mind raced, grasping at any thread of hope, any plan that might lead to escape. Retreating toward the base was out of the question. It would only end in them being surrounded, trapped like fish in a barrel. And worse still, she realized with a sinking heart that she didn't have a single way to contact her team. No backup. No reinforcements. The only chance she had to shake them off was to use the sand budgie. But the desert was a treacherous betrayer. Footprints left deep impressions in the soft earth, and if those prints suddenly morphed into tire tracks, suspicion would bloom like blood in water. The same went for entering her spatial dimension. The abrupt cessation of her footprints would be a glaring sign, a beacon to her pursuers. Her mind churned, thoughts spinning like a wheel caught in mud, until suddenly, an idea struck her, a desperate, reckless idea, but an idea nonetheless. She reached into her spatial dimension, her consciousness brushing against its cool, boundless expanse, and pulled out a plastic cup. With quick, trembling hands, she filled it to the brim with the water from within. Yesterday, out in the wild, that water had drawn the killer vines. Perhaps it held some strange allure for other creatures as well. It didn't matter what it attracted so long as something, anything, intervened and muddled the tracks she left behind. She could use the chaos to slip away into her dimension unnoticed. With this fragile hope clutched tightly in her chest, she began to scatter the water as she ran, droplets splashing onto the sand in erratic, shimmering arcs. She was utterly spent, every muscle in her body screaming for rest, but she prayed with every fiber of her being that the water would work its magic. And then, as if answering her silent plea, the sound came. A faint rustling, barely perceptible at first, but growing louder, closer. Fang Qingdai's senses sharpened, her body tensing as she scanned the dim, shifting shadows around her. And then she saw them glowing green dots, dozens of them, flickering like ghostly lanterns in the dark. Fireflies. Her heart leapt to her throat as the truth revealed itself. What degenerate rats! The shrill, chittering cries of rodents filled the air, and her skin crawled as she realized the eerie green lights were the eyes of rats, dozens, no, hundreds of them, their beady gazes fixed on her. Disgust and relief roared within her, but there was no time to dwell on either. It didn't matter what they were. They'd come. That was all that mattered. Seizing the moment, Fang Qingdai darted into her spatial dimension just as the swarm of rats surged forward, their claws and teeth tearing into the sand where her footprints had been. Her consciousness lingered outside, watching as the rodents obliterated any trace of her path, their frenzied movements turning the ground into a chaotic mess. Only then did she allow herself to collapse inside the dimension, her body trembling, her breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. The rats, for their part, seemed utterly bewildered. Their tiny eyes widened comically, their whiskered faces scrunching in confusion as they stared at the empty space where Fang Qingdai had just been. Xiaobin and his men arrived moments later, their weapons glinting faintly under the moonlight. But before they could even process the absence of their quarry, they were met with the unexpected, an army of rats, their numbers swelling like a tide. The men froze, their bravado faltering as the rodents turned their attention toward them. And then chaos erupted anew. Screams and curses filled the night as Xiaobin's group scattered, their earlier fury replaced by sheer panic. The rats gave chase, their movements unnervingly swift, their chittering cries echoing like a sinister symphony. From within her dimension, Fang Qingdai watched it all unfold, her lips curling into a weary, triumphant smile. Xiaoben and his men, exhausted from the chase, stood no chance against the nimble, relentless swarm. Her eyes gleamed with a renewed spark of determination. Slowly, she reached up with her mind, testing the waters, attempting to move her spatial dimension forward, to follow the chaos as it unfolded. Consciousness had the power to manipulate space itself, a revelation that made Fang Qingday's eyes gleam with a sharp, almost predatory light. She pursued relentlessly, her gaze fixed on the scene unfolding ahead, Xiaoben's group, one by one, being torn apart by a monstrous horde of rats. Their crimson eyes burned like embers in the dark, their jagged teeth gleaming, their bodies as massive as millstones. The rats devoured them completely, leaving no trace behind. The carnage was grotesque, a tableau of blood and bone that clawed at the edges of her composure. Fang Qingday had killed the forest and Zhao Kun and his ilk with her own hands, but the visceral brutality of this feeding frenzy turned her complexion pale as paper. Still, she refused to sever her mental connection to the scene. She forced herself to watch, to bear witness to every grisly moment. There was a practical reason. Of course, she needed to ensure they were all dead. After all, she had plans to scavenge whatever equipment they left behind. The memory of her last haul, a treasure trove of weapons, vehicles, and more banished the oppressive weight in her chest. The thought even kindled a flicker of anticipation within her, a faint but undeniable thrill. 14 men had set out in Zhao Bin's group. 13 were now nothing more than scraps of flesh and bone, scattered among the ravenous horde. Only Zhao Bin remained, staggering forward in a desperate, almost pitiful attempt to escape. He was alive, yes, but barely a man running on fumes, his strength little more than a flickering candle in a storm. Fang Qingday's eyes narrowed. He wouldn't last long. But then, in the next instant, something happened that left her momentarily stunned. She watched, incredulous, as Xiaoben hurled a ball of fire from his hand. A fireball. Was Xiaoben an ability user? For a moment, her thought stumbled, caught in the web of this new possibility. Quickly, she willed the space around her to contract, drawing herself closer for a better look. This time, she saw it clearly. The fireball had come from some hidden weapon or device. It had materialized in Zhao Bin's palm, summoned from thin air, just as it would with any other ability user. Impossible. If Zhao Bin had such powers, he should have sought refuge in the safety of one of the bases long ago. There, he could have lived a life of relative comfort, perhaps even brought Zhao Kun along as a dependent. Why would he choose to languish in the squalor of the shanty town, struggling for survival? Even if he had some twisted attachment to his position as the second in command of the local gang, surely he would have used his abilities to solidify his power, to command fear and respect. It made no sense for him to have hidden his powers until now. Unless his ability had only just awakened. She scrutinized the fireball's size and intensity, noting its feeble glow. Yes, it was hypothetically so. Her mind spun with possibilities, but Xiaoben, oblivious to her silent observations, had already conjured several more fireballs. Each one forced the ravenous rats to retreat a few paces, buying him precious seconds to flee. He turned and ran again, his movements frantic and uncoordinated, like a marionette whose strings were being yanked by an unskilled puppeteer. Fang Qingday frowned. For a brief moment, she considered intercepting him, cutting him down before he could escape. But then her gaze shifted, tracking the direction of his flight. He wasn't running toward the base. Quite the opposite, he was fleeing blindly, away from any hope of rescue. At this rate, his stamina would fail him long before he reached safety. The rats would catch up, and his fate would be sealed. There was no need for her to intervene. Still, she followed him at a measured pace, her presence a shadow trailing his every step. She watched as he stumbled, as his legs buckled beneath him, as his breath came in ragged, uneven gasps. He was unraveling, inch by inch, and she bore witness to every moment. The monotony of his slow collapse began to wear on her. Bored, she reached into her bag, pulled out a packet of chips, and began to munch idly, the crunching sound a strange counterpoint to the distant screeches of the rats. Xiao Ben threw another fireball, But this one was pitifully small. Where once they had been the size of ping-pong balls, now they were no larger than peanuts. Damn it, whose useless ability did I extract this from? He spat, his voice a venomous snarl. Without pausing, he turned and resumed his desperate flight. Fine Kinde froze, her mind stuttering to a halt. Extract. What did he mean by that? His ability was his own. Had he taken it from someone else? Her thoughts raced, piecing together fragments of speculation. Was this some unique power of his? Or was it something darker, something unspeakable? As she wrestled with these questions, Foul Ben's movements came to an abrupt stop. And then, as if tethered to his will, the rats halted as well. Fine Kinde's eyes narrowed, her curiosity sharpening into something keener, more dangerous. She pushed aside her thoughts and focused on the scene before her, scanning for the cause of this sudden stillness. It did take her long to spot it. The buildings ahead of Zalbin were crumbling, their surfaces warped and pockmarked. The air shimmered faintly, distorted by an invisible force. High radiation zone. Understanding dawned on her in an instant. Zalbin's face had turned ashen, his expression a mask of terror. He stood frozen, caught between two equally grim fates. Ahead lay the radiation, a slow and agonizing death. Behind him, the rats waited, their hunger undiminished. He didn't dare move forward. But retreating was no option either.